All right, welcome to the September 11th, 2025 work session for the Board of Education. Before we get into the agenda, I'm going to ask us to observe a moment of silence in honor of September 11th and the remembrance of what happened 24 years ago. All right, thank you. All right, let's move into our agenda. We'll start with the consent agenda, and I'll just ask if anyone has any questions on any of those items, any requests to discuss or pull any of those off the consent agenda. Otherwise, we'll vote on those as a block Monday night. Okay. We will move right into the superintendent's report. I know you've got several things, Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, board members. They may be adjusting the mic just a tiny bit. You may notice in the superintendent's report, we have two key components, the Screen Time Technology Committee update and the 25-26 textbook adoption process. We're going to have some of our team members actually give you some presentations on that. We were able to get one to you a day or so ahead of time. That's the textbook adoption process, and I'll give you some more detail related to that. But I want to give you 4 or 5 short, just quick updates that are timely and actually prompted by some of the questions that you all, some of them by questions you all as board members asked. I want to give you an update in enrollment. We base our enrollment year-to-year numbers on day 20 of school, which was basically the day before Labor Day this year. So our total enrollment is down 0.9% from the year before. We actually had a slight increase in middle school, and high school was flat, and then the bulk of the reduction was at the elementary school level, which is actually year 3 of the trend that we've been talking about. It was interesting, one of the county commissioners asked me about it this Monday at the county commission meeting, and I answered the question, and then a commissioner mentioned, well, that jives exactly with the data I'm seeing about folks moving into Williamson County. She specifically mentioned 50 plus moving in. I don't have that data, so we're going to follow up. I'm curious about where she's seen some of that. So that's the enrollment numbers in the aggregate, but we are still seeing some growth, especially in the Page area. Page Middle itself grew by about 120 students. That was the most significant growth area. So what we have just a mix of reductions in some areas with some growth in others. If I'm not mistaken, something like 17 or 18 of our schools grew, which means somewhere around 30 to 35 actually saw a slight reduction. Most of the reductions are fairly small. Most of the growth numbers are fairly small, other than that particular Page Middle one. One that we've actually been keeping an eye on specifically, Nolensville Elementary went down from about 880 to about 850. And that's one that on our 5-year capital plan we had projected as an area for the next school. So we're going to be evaluating those numbers as we prepare our 5-year capital plan. And as a reminder there, that's scheduled for November, but we made a commitment to bring that draft to you in October so that you have time to think about it. We will also be posting these numbers on our website. We always do that on an annual basis. And so I know Carol Birdsong's team, it's already up? Okay, well, there you go. So I thought that was an interesting item. I will tell you also, a couple of neighboring superintendents called me about kindergarten and said, hey, are you seeing your kindergarten numbers go down? And the answer is yes. So we've also seen that there's actually been an impact on the birth rates that actually are consistent with that as well. Now, we are in the process of receiving from private schools, the students who have Williamson County addresses and are enrolled at the private schools. The state actually requires those schools to report that. So we'll get some homeschool umbrella organizations and local private schools send us those numbers, the parochial schools and the private schools that have Williamson County residents from across. Once we gather that data up, that'll give us a little bit more insight as well into the numbers. One really good thing about that is that's been a contributing factor to our staffing being so much better now than it has been in past years. So Vicki, I'm going to rattle these off the top of my head. We are 99.5% staffed in general education teachers. We are 98% staffed in special education teachers. In the 20 years I've been here, 19 and a half years I've been here, I don't think we've been anywhere near those numbers in staffing. I will tell you, a lot of those positions are job embedded based on the state programs to find ways for folks to get their job license. And so what we found is that there's a need often for some additional supports because many of those teachers haven't had the pedagogy classes, how to teach classes that the traditional undergrad process gives. We are 80, let's see, if I'm not mistaken, Vicki, 98% staffed in special education teachers assistants, is that? Yes. 98% in special education teachers assistants, which is really good. Now the reality is if you're one of those in that 2% and you're missing somebody, it can be a challenge. Our bus drivers, we have every route covered, but you may remember that we actually have first and second loads at many of those areas that can knock out a route, especially at the elementary level, in half an hour. So it's still an ongoing effort. We would prefer to have no first and second loads, but our staffing just won't allow that. So that's still something that we're working on. So that's kind of an enrollment and staffing quick update. Did want to let you know there's a new firearm safety law. If I'm not mistaken, Dana mentioned that at one point when she was rolling through some of the new laws. I want to give you some specifics. The law requires school systems to give basically 5 points to students related to gun safety, and it centers around if you see something, don't touch it, and related requirements. The law indicated that the state would give some recommended curriculum. Those will be presented in the form of videos, a 3-minute or so elementary student video. Am I giving away something when I say McGruff the crime dog is involved in the video? Okay. We're finishing producing that. Mike Flesher's participating along with a piece from McGruff the crime dog that TDOE has given us. At the high school level, I think it's about I'm sorry. McGruff. Himself. McGruff himself. Thank you for that, Carol. At the high school level, it's secondary level, high and middle, we've actually structured something that's a podcast with a student participating, asking questions of our safety team. We don't have a schedule yet for when those will be presented. Again, it's going to vary from school to school just a bit.
I think they're going to do it the second semester, and we're going to share it we'll put it out in a focus first.
Okay. So the plan is for those to roll out in the second semester. You may have noticed a couple of the local television stations had some reports on 1 or 2 school districts in that process. So felt like it was important for you to hear that. I do want to give an update on the fee structure that we had a vote on a few months ago related to class voluntary fees. You may recall that discussion where we spoke to this basic truism that they're not fees because they're not required for anything during class. And we made a commitment at the secondary level that we were no longer going to call them fees, but look at a one-time gift. From a numbers perspective, we've received about 1/3 of what we received last year to date. Last year, the total district-wide was about 1.1 million. We're in the high 300,000s, Rachel, if I'm not mistaken. We passed 400,000. So I want to tell you where we are with that in our process. You may remember that a few months ago I said I may come back to you with a request. We're not there yet, but we made a plan to do a last push for that this week and next week with some targeted marketing towards our families. The essence of it surrounding, if your child participates in one of these classes and you haven't donated, we ask that you make a gift for those extras that individual teachers do. After that after that 2-week period, which ends next week, we're going to have some individual conversations with our principals about what did you spend the money on and what are your priorities. I mentioned that 1.1 million. Last year, our principals spent about 80% of what they brought in for those particular classes. So we're going to have a detailed discussion with them. We're going to look at what funding they have in their site-based funds that might be undesignated, make some priorities there. It is possible I may come back to you to fill in some of those gaps with that. And I know we had some discussion at some point about, is this something that should be in the budget long-term? I will tell you, we're not there yet because so many of these particular class fees/donations are related to what a particular teacher wants to do to teach how he or she wants to teach the curriculum. There might be a teacher down the hall teaching the same class who might not want to do a particular activity, or might not want, for example, an art teacher, clay versus paint, that kind of thing, so the pricing may be different. So we're going to have some more detailed discussions about that before next budget year. So wanted you to be aware of that. You might hear something. I will tell you a couple things I heard related to that, and some of you have shared this with me. A couple of themes we heard from families, and again, it's anecdotal. Number one, I like to spend something that I know my child's going to get the direct benefit from. That's been something we've often heard from families through this process. And I knew with a fee that it was going straight to that. Another thing that we've heard thematically is there's some fatigue in the ask because there have been multiple asks. Now, we heard some of that last year too, because every teacher had their fee request. But we've heard some commentary related to that. I do want to let you know, Rachel does have our numbers from last year for our PTO donations. We received a total in actual dollars last year from PTOs of a little over $16.1 million. That's a pretty incredible number. The year before it was $14.9 million. So we've gone up, obviously, if you do that quick math, by about 1.2 million. Our PTOs and our booster clubs do an incredible job in supporting those programs. Largely that's extracurricular, but some PTOs will actually, contribute to particular goals that their principals make as well. As an example, one of our schools actually did not do the fundraiser ask for the replacement of school fees because their structure had been just to go straight to the PTO. So there's just been a variation based on the particular community and what the PTO leaders and the principals work out. So we're still working on that. I did want to give you another just-in-time update. Question came up related to our GPA calculation. I think we've told you this basic story, and Dr. Webb, I may call on you for some detail related to this. Last year, the University of Tennessee announced that they were giving automatic admission to students who placed in the top 10% of every class. And we, since, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere around 2015 or so, have not structured our classes that way, with that kind of class rank where you can drill down to a percentage. And we made that decision back then largely because we had so many high performers whose GPAs were so compressed that that your class rank might actually be misleading. You might be, in the 80th percentile and be just right near the top in your grades. But we recognize it because of that UT program that we needed to make an adjustment. One of the adjustments we made was related to students transferring in after having had some high school at another location. And we wanted to make sure that if that school that they came from had a GPA structure that was different from ours, we didn't want to run the risk of somebody who was with us being bumped from that top 10% and miss out on the opportunity based on somebody having a different structure. So we created a structure where in the past 10 years we actually just rolled their GPA on into our existing GPA to restructuring that GPA based on the WCS weights. For example, the AP classes got an additional 1.0 on a 4.0 scale. The honors classes were a 0.5 on a 1.0 scale. And then you may recall that the state actually created a structure for an extra bump for dual enrollment classes. So we've initiated that structure. What we found is that for some students transferring in, their GPA actually went up with those weights, but for others it went down. The best example is if a school had a A+, A- scale, there might be a 4.3 for a class that would have been a 4.0 on our scale. So in that issue, we found that there were also some colleges who in essence say, we will give scholarships based on your GPA. So just in these last few days, I want to thank Dr. Reeves for bringing this to our attention. We did some drilling down and we identified that, and for those few students whose GPA goes down, we do have the capacity to calculate both the WCS weighted and what it would look like if they had come from another district, if they just brought their GPA with them. So we are initiating an option for those students to include that third GPA on their transcript if it reflects an opportunity. I don't want to name the particular school because I'm speaking for them and it might not be quite right, but we have heard that at least one large college out of state has said, whatever your highest GPA is on the transcript is what we're going to base our scholarships on. So we want to make sure we honor that. Dr. Webb, can you give some detail related to that?
Absolutely. Ooh, excuse me. Is that better?
No.
Okay. Is that better? All right. Thank you, Mr. Golden. So the only additional thing that I would add is actually some of the loudest voices we heard were not WCS students who were bumped from the top 10%, but it was from transfer students who transferred to us from school districts and individual schools that did not weight their GPAs at all. And they were enrolled in AP and honors classes, primarily AP classes, on a 4-point scale versus the weighted scale, and they felt like that they were unjustly being bumped from guaranteed admission to UT Knoxville because we were not putting them on our uniform scale so that all students in our senior class competitively could be viewed from the same lens. And so it does take time to go through the analysis and make all those changes. Our target was to ensure that we had all of those GPA factors in place within the first 30 days of this school year, and we're on track for that. All of those senior GPAs have been adjusted, and we're finalizing the fine-tuning of that transcript template so that we can roll it out the first of next week for those students who want to make that choice to include all 3 GPAs on their transcript. And to Mr. Golden's point, if any student well, let me say this first, to the university perspective, we have heard from several universities when it comes to weighted, unweighted GPAs, there are many admissions benefits, in-state tuition benefits, and scholarship benefits based upon the highest GPA reflected on a school transcript. So again, this is a transition to the weighted scale where all seniors, all students are evaluated using the same mechanism, but we did feel like in this transition period, it was appropriate for those students who had a shift that shifted them lower, that they have the opportunity to choose whether or not that third one appears on their GPA or on their transcript or not. So we're finalizing that process. A student can request to have it added. If it's a student who transferred or a student who doesn't have any transfer credits, there will be no change to how their transcript is written. The other piece I wanted to make sure is clear is that there are 2 GPAs that are on every high school transcript. One is our weighted GPA, which Mr. Golden is just speaking of. The other is an unweighted GPA that is consistent for Tennessee Hope scholarship competitions, and that GPA has remained consistent for all of our students. That's been a uniform scale from the jump.
Thank you for mentioning that. So in the issue that prompted us to change with the University of Tennessee, no change to the unweighted scale that's related to the Hope Scholarship.
That's right. And our highest GPA, the weighted GPA, is what we send to the University of Tennessee for guaranteed admissions to all of their universities.
I also want to mention a couple of items before we get into the presentations that actually came about as a result of the county commission meeting on Monday night. I always do a short schools report, Mayor Anderson speaks to the county, then me, and then typically the hospital. I actually had two questions that I felt like it was worth mentioning to you tonight at that Monday night meeting. One, the comptroller did the county audit. And in the letter to Mayor Anderson, there were actually two comments related to us. Felt like it was worth mentioning. Number one, and they were not findings, they were just recommendations. And so the first one was they recommended that from an accounting perspective, and Rachel, you may have to catch me with the terminology. I don't know if it's a generally accepted accounting principle or just a recommendation, that for accounting purposes, they don't recommend that you use the previous year's fund balance to fund the next year's budget. And that has historically and is historically our model for a very practical reason of there's money there, and so we incorporate it into the budget. So if I'm not mistaken, the basic theme they had in that letter was you should treat that as undesignated or some version of that. You're nodding your head. And the second one was that they are actually recommending from the comptroller's office that that school systems should have 2 months of operating expenses as the fund balance. The Tennessee Department of Education requires us to have 3%. So every year, we meet the Tennessee Department of Education requirements of having a 3% fund balance. 2 months fund balance is about 16.7%. So if we applied that basic principle, our fund balance, when we start with an annual budget of undesignated fund balance, is somewhere between 16 and 17 million. That would have to jump our undesignated fund balance up to about 90 million, based on our current budget, which is a substantial change. And so a commissioner asked me about that. I mentioned to them that would be a very different model from what county government has been doing for decades. So I felt like it was important for you to hear that because that was discussed at the meeting. Before we get into the presentations, Mr. Chair, I don't know if there might be any questions related to those nutshell items.
Melissa?
I was curious if we've heard from the PTOs, if collecting the fees, or formerly known as fees, if that has impacted their fundraising and what that looks like for them.
Dr. Webb, I have not heard that directly, but
I've only heard anecdotal things,
Okay.
and the substantial feedback I can give is we heard from Thompson Station Middle that by their PTO taking all of the donations instead of it being split, they've actually had a higher participation rate than they had last year when, from the PTO, so they were pleased with that. I would have to ask each individual school to give us an update on that to be able to speak with clarity.
Thank you.
and I will tell you, related to that, we're going to have some discussions, in the next few months to prepare for next year. I anticipate we're going to do a somewhat different model from this year. At the least, it's going to be tweaked as we brainstorm over it to try to do what we can to make sure folks are taken care of at the classroom level, and we're doing right by our families as well.
Jay?
So on that note, I don't know how we're gonna end up. There's a lot of feedback. But I don't know how we're gonna end up as a percentage of what we collected in prior years. But I think it's something that's really hard to communicate. And at the end of the day, the reason it's hard to communicate is because we're asking for money for something that, honestly, if we're honest with everybody, if we don't get any money, everything or most of the things that are needs, if there are any wants out there, I get that those might be on the table for not getting everything that teachers want. But if there's anything that is an absolute need to do to take care of our academic classes, it's going to get done. And I absolutely cannot stand this, but I just got this email, and it makes me so mad that we're sending out these things to our schools, and we're saying our goal is to raise another $60,000 to fund the classroom needs for the spring semester. Without your help, we are concerned that we won't be able to purchase the remainder of essential classroom supplies. That's just not true.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah.
And we get this stuff all the time. It makes me absolutely so mad that we're stoking fear and trying to get the money, and it's all about money. And this is something that we should never be even asked. And I get why it's so hard. You can't raise money if you say, well, we really want you to pay, but if you don't, we've got the money to pay. Like, I get the messaging. That's why we need to stop. Like, we need to put it in the budget. There's never going to be a good time to put it in the budget. We're never going to have this surplus. Like, it's always going to be tight. We just have to do it. And we have to tell the county commission, this is stupid. Why are we asking our parents to pay for supplies, and we're threatening them that they're not going to get to dissect their frog, or they're not going to get their band instrument, or they're not going to get their cleaning supplies or art supplies or sheet music? Like, it's stupid. Like, I've talked about this every single time. I know it's one of my hot button issues, but it just highlights the fact, and I don't want to get. We've had to over a decade in dealing with this. We have had to. It's been a continuum. We used to have teachers that were threatening grades or giving extra credit for getting the money, but at the end of the day, I know, Jason, you said anecdotally that people would like to give money because they know it's going directly to their kid. It was never going directly to their kid. They just thought it was. If their class had super great participation and they got more money for science class than they thought they would, it goes in a big pot and that money gets overflowed. If they were short and they didn't collect all their money, they were going to get their frogs. Like, they always got their frogs. It was never tied to how much money that teacher gave, and no student performance was ever tied to whether they paid or not. And so it makes me so mad that we're still having this conversation, and it's all because we had to fund the budget. I'm just going to go back in history. We had to fund the budget one year because revenues were down, and so we decided to ask people to pay for this. That was in 2008. Until then, since then, we've had plenty of increases in the budget. We've added revenue sources. We've done everything, but there's never been a good time to get rid of this $1 million revenue source. And this is the time. So I'm not gonna wait and see what y'all do. If we need to tell you and vote on it and say, I want you to put this in the budget, let's do that before we get to the budget, because I know it's not going to be easy. It's not as easy as just saying you're going to get what you got last year.
Yeah.
We need to find some kind of equitable way to give a budget to all the schools, but then they're going to have to figure it out over and above that through the PTOs. If they don't want to ask for money, I'm fine with that. Yeah. But I'm going to ask for the board's support next month before we get to the budget, and just say, I want this all to be in the budget and figure it out.
Thank you for that. I want to mention one piece related to that. And we talked about this. I think it's worth mentioning. I don't want any individual parent to believe that they have an obligation to pay that. And that method will resolve it. Again, related to budget, it's gonna take some work by us, because the ask is different from school to school and teacher to teacher. And so that's going to take some work.
Can you do a ballpark figure? I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, Jason and Rachel, but based on the collections that we're seeing right now on those fees, what percentage does that represent of what we collected last year, for example? Just roughly.
Sure. So currently, we're right, 38% of what's the total for last year is what's been collected so far for this year.
And then last year, the budgeted amount, we actually spent less than
We
the
did. We
actual
spent about
budget.
$886,000.
So it's we spent about 80% of what we budgeted last time.
That's right.
So the delta between the actual from last year and the current this year is roughly what amount of money?
472, 783 as of
You
this
know the
morning.
exact amount. You probably anticipated that question, didn't you?
I did.
So $472,000 is what, assuming no more money comes in,
That's
is
correct.
the gap.
That is the monetary gap. And then as Dr. Webb was saying, there's some conversations to be had. I do think some schools approached things a little differently and maybe said, specifically for a class, if you could, would y'all be willing to bring in an item? And so, or novels, for instance. Here's a novel that we know you're going to read. You can go check it out from a public library, check it out from our library in advance. So we're not going to ask you to pay that fee. So in that case, we're not asking you to pay the fee to cover the cost, but you have a book, go borrow it from somebody. So we do want to talk on an individual basis like that to see, do they really need money to cover the cost, or has it been covered in a different way?
Any other questions or comments on that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm ready for us to hit item A. We're a half hour in already. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I
missed
was
that.
I was done with that particular topic, but I did want to address the transfer student GPA thing. Thank you both for working on that. A parent in my district brought that forward. She was very upset, and I appreciate the solution that you all have found. So just want clarification. If a transfer student opts for having the 3 GPAs listed, they will be able to use the highest GPA in some of the applications if the universities accept it.
That's correct. It depends on the university.
Okay.
That's right.
All right. And then I have to admit, I felt a little flat-footed when this parent contacted me. I didn't recall the board talking about it.
Yeah.
We have a board policy for report cards and grading systems. And to me, this feels like it was something that should be in policy. I think that there was a misstep in that the Common App opened on August 1st, and the communication about this, the only communication I saw was on August 26th and in Focus. And as we know, not everybody reads in Focus. So I think direct communication to families of transfer students about this change would have been beneficial. I also think that if it's the will of the board, maybe it's something that, should be spelled out in policy. So.
Thank you for that feedback. We'll review what we worked on for that, is for sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Allen, your team, I want to give you, I would like you all to give us an update on the Screen Time Technology Committee. And as our folks are getting up, I wanted to mention to you that the committee met Tuesday night. It was the first one I missed because I had actually 2 conflicts. I had to be with our WCA building reps. I heard it was a good meeting. Just from an attendance perspective, Tanya Hibma is out, so she was not able to attend. And I do know that both Jay Galbraith and Donna, by the way, is Donna participating by phone? So they both sat in and participated in that meeting as well, along with Melissa. Certainly invite you all to share through the process of this presentation from our team about where we are. What I would like you to be thinking about as a target as you're listening to this presentation is the Screen Time Committee focused their earlier meetings, as you know, on cell phones and personal devices. They have come up with some recommended changes to the policy. So what I want you all to be thinking about as a leadership team here is, do you have any other questions? And you've got some time. That's not to be decided on tonight. Do any questions develop in your mind about the work the committee's done so far that you might want them to explore a little bit more deeply, or for school administration to explore deeply? And second, start thinking about their recommendations for policy, because this will be informing our work over these next few months related to that. So I know that Jenny Lopez has passed out their final document. That will be kind of at the tail end of her presentation as she walks through what the committee has gone through. And again, those of you who participate, I encourage you to pitch in at any point during this presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Golden. Good evening, board members. As you requested, we have some recommendations for you to refine our wireless communication policy. This was a request made back this summer, and we worked on that and have lots of information to share with you. Two of the board members, as Mr. Golden mentioned, were part of that committee, and I would love to give Melissa Wyatt, who was on that committee, a little time to share her experience and share about the committee work.
Sure. I just wanted to update y'all on what it has looked like so far for the Screen Time Committee. We have met 3 times in May, August, and September. May was just a kind of get to know you, introductions, and big picture brainstorm. I think we told you all about that it was just all the different topics were spread out around the room. We moved around together, and just everybody kind of brought their big ideas. August and September were more focused on the new cell phone policy. In addition to those 3 meetings, Tanya and I also met with Dave and Jenny and Andy in July to brainstorm about the August meeting and to work on that agenda. All of the meetings included entire group discussions and then also smaller group discussions within our grade bands. I was really glad that we had those entire group discussions because several of the parents that were on the committee had students in different grade bands. So then they could participate and share their experiences as, parenting students at different ages. At each of the meetings, the committee was asked, what more information do you need? And we were always a lot of follow-up emails. Everyone on the committee was encouraged to read The Anxious Generation. Some people suggested articles and links to be emailed, and so everybody on the committee received those. The 2 things that the committee asked for were feedback from families and also from the principals. So we talked briefly last month about the family feedback we had received so far, and I know Jenny's going to talk more about that, but we had over 2,600 responses from that. So that was really helpful to receive that and to know how it felt to our families. And then Jenny will also talk more about the principal feedback. For the May and August meetings, Tanya and I were in the 2 elementary grade bands, so K through 2 and 3 through 5. But we could tell after the August discussions that overall the new policy impacted elementary the least. They were already doing so much of what the policy stated. So, and the experiences and the opinions of middle school and high school were very broad, and those discussions were more lively. So Tanya and I moved to middle and high school for this September meeting. Tanya wasn't able to be there, but Jay was there, so he participated in the high school discussion, and Donna and I were part of the middle school, Jay did middle school, Donna and I did the high school discussion. So overall, I feel like the committee has been really helpful and productive. As you all know, cell phones and technology are a big issue right now, and we want to create the best learning environment for our students. The format of the meeting has been effective in facilitating interaction, conversation, and understanding. Our work will continue over the next 2 months. We will look at technology integration. And also, each of you know someone on the committee, so I encourage you to reach out to that person and hear about their experiences so far, and definitely be in touch with Tanya and me if we can help with that. So there's the committee experience so far.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So I'm going to have 2 parts to my presentation. The first part is going to be a committee overview, the work on the wireless device policy work with the committee, and I'm going to share with you what we shared with the committee. So we shared with them family and administrator feedback. That was at their request. So I'm going to share that information with you. And then I'm going to spend the bulk of our time on the policy refinement recommendations. And you have 2 packets of handouts, and I'm going to explain what those are in just a second as I go through my presentation. So the committee overview. The role of the committee was to make recommendations about student technology usage, and that's broader than just the cell phone policy. That's going to be about tech integration, screen time, and then family resources. We want to engage with research and expert opinions, and that's been really important to that committee from day 1 that they receive information. So we've sent all that information to them as requested. We collaborate within grade bands because, as you know, technology is so different from one grade band to the other that we do our work. We do our work whole group, as Melissa mentioned, but we also do our work in specific grade bands to make sure that we're approaching those as appropriate for the age level. And we utilize guiding questions to develop guidance. So that's how we generate conversations. And of course, we ask committee members when we've asked the board what exactly we want discussed. And then so we generate questions based on that to help us move that time along. So, okay. So talking about grade bands, as you notice, we have 4 different grade bands. The conversations can be very different from K2 to 3-5, just because the age range between a kindergartner and a 5th grader are so wide. So we have a K2, a 3-5, a 6-8, and a 9-12. As you notice, there are parents, teachers, administrators, instructional coaches, and then board members in the different groups. I want to just stop and thank you so much for the nomination. So we had for parents. These parents are amazing. They show up. It's late. It's after work. Their kids are home. I don't know what they do, but they make it. They make it. Not only do they make it, but they are in communication with me. They want research. They read it. You can tell they've read it. They come in. They're prepared to do the work. That's amazing. So not only are they showing up and being super engaged, but then they're doing their homework, which is amazing. So thank you so much for those recommendations. That's been really helpful. Yes, ma'am. We had already put together a committee to do work on tech integration and some of the other pieces before this cell phone policy came up. So we already had a committee to work on this, a smaller committee, and then we grew that committee much wider after the board wanted different things done or additional topics discussed in that committee. So, okay. So these are our 4 topics. So as you notice, that one is highlighted in yellow because that is not our original document. The original document had us going in a different order, and we were going to begin with integration of technology and then screen time. And because of the cell phone policy going into effect this summer, the board members and also our committee were really interested in doing and talking about discussing and having these recommendations now just because it was timely. So we changed the order of our topics. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the committee work, what work was done. So first of all, we started with setting norms for reaching consensus. I've led other committees on reaching consensus on different topics, from visioning work for content and some other pieces. That is really hard work. So I think just kind of talking about the norms and what it takes to reach consensus was really important. So we always started our work with this. On May 12th, Melissa did a really good job of explaining what we did, so I'm not going to go deep into this, but basically May 12th just set the foundation, and May 12th gave us a lot of insight on what kind of information the committee really wanted, like what they really wanted to talk about. And we did lots of work. As Melissa said, we did this like walk around the room and lots of conversations, lots of writing, and then the different groups got to speak out. At that point, we weren't in grade bands yet. We were just kind of all, like we had smaller groups, and we had lots of robust discussions at that first meeting. And it really gave us insight into what the committee wanted to see. On August 12th, we began the work. So, and of course up there it says that's when the adjusted order of topics was done, was after the May meeting, when that was the wish of that committee. We also provided lots of research for them to read over the summer, so they would be prepared on August 12th to engage. So on August 12th, that was part 1 of the 2 meetings on this topic. We analyzed family responses. That was something the committee really wanted. They asked to hear what our family, what our community thought about the policy. And at that meeting, we began the work of reaching consensus. So they were given a form, a structure to work with, and they began that work. On September 9th, which was just this week, we came back and we listened to administrator feedback. That came out of the August 12th meeting. At the August 12th meeting, the committee said, we really want to know what principals think. Like, how are they implementing? How is it going? What is difficult? What about consequences? So we brought we used the principals on the committee to provide that input that they wanted, that the committee wanted, but those principals, before providing that feedback, met with all the other principals of their grade level and brought back lots of information. So it wasn't information based on one principal, but the information based on the group of principals. So this week, we met again. We listened to administrator feedback on implementation and consequences, and then we continued where we left off. So we were kind of like halfway done on the recommendations. We picked up again and continued that work to reach consensus on recommendations for refinement. So I want to share with you some of the artifacts that we shared with the committee. Here's a list of all of the email content that we provided the committee on some research, some is articles, a couple of books, information that they really wanted to prepare for their time together. So now I'm going to share with you family and administrator feedback. So we shared all that research and books and all that, and then we gave them some family feedback. 2,655 responses to the question that was sent to families about, and that was closed to our district, so that wasn't like wide community feedback, but family feedback, like our Williamson County school families. As you can see, there's a breakdown because we asked what grade level. So they got to pick elementary, middle, high, or multi, which means they have students in more than one grade band. And as you can see, elementary and high were kind of close in the number of responses, but also multi. So middle school fell there, and probably a lot of middle school fell into the other categories. So we took all of that. As you can imagine, this is an open response. So families get to, when they respond it's all writing. It's not check boxes, it's writing. They got to really tell us what they thought. So Andy did this magical work of putting all of that data into AI and saying, hey, create some trends that we can actually digest, right? You have that in front of you in one of the two packets I gave you. So one of those two packets has these trends, but it has explanations, like details on the trends. So when it says, the first one says calls for clearer policy enforcement and communication, it's gonna tell you some of the language that was used, that AI selected to say, okay, this is a trend. So it was seen multiple times, the language was similar, so it categorized it as that topic. So number one, there are calls for clearer policy enforcement and communication. That was one of the trends. Number two, concerns about emergency access and safety. And before I continue, I forgot to say one thing. Your packet has multiple pages because one of those, the first one, it's just Williamson County trends. So that's kind of like taking all of the 2,600 responses and creating trends. The next one just looked at elementary. So these are our elementary responses. So how did elementary parents respond? What are those trends? Then middle, then high. So we have those as an entire district and then into different grade bands. So I just wanted you to know that as you're looking at it. Number three, there were concerns about distraction, social issues, and mental health, just the whole reason why we have a cell phone policy. Mixed views on device use during non-instructional time. So when they're not in the classroom, there were mixed reviews about whether they should use their phones or not. Support for restricting wireless device during the school day. So there was definitely support for the policy. Support for stricter controls and device bans, especially for our younger students. And then recognition for the need for balance and special accommodations. So if you're interested, there's lots of writing there. It's kind of small because it's a lot, but there's lots of information there that'll give this, like some meat to this, which are kind of like the bones of the trends. Okay, so now I'm going to share. So that was one piece that we shared with them, and we shared that with them in the August meeting and yesterday. In the August meeting, we gave them the data that had been collected up to that day or the day before. Yesterday, we gave them the data that had been collected from that last meeting, from the last time we pulled the data to the day that the form closed. So we gave them that data, that family data, twice. The data did not change very much. So what we gave them the first time didn't change too much, like the trends were pretty much the same, but we provided it. We thought maybe once the students get into school and this policy is really in effect, the data may change, the feedback may change, but it was actually very, very similar, but we did share it again. And then we had our administrator share out. So we had an elementary administrator share out, the kind of like the consensus, the group consensus from elementary administrators. We did it for middle and we did it for high. Yes, sir.
Is they're numbered on here? Is that like by rank, like it was more important, or is it just points?
Andy can tell us about that.
Sure. No, sir. It's just how the AI ordered it. It was
Okay,
not, that's
okay.
not, it's not like this was the most
This
important.
was okay. That's all I wanted to know.
It's just,
Yeah.
it's just like, here's the list of the
Gotcha.
top trends.
Okay,
Great question.
great.
Thank you.
So this was the administrator feedback to the committee. The current policy is more lenient than what the schools already had in place in the past. So our schools had already taken steps to limit the cell phone distractions in the classroom. Elementary felt like what they were doing was beyond what the policy was saying. So they really felt no changes. Like elementary says, we have felt no change due to this policy because we already had a lot of things in place. Schools were already storing off the body, for example, and in cubbies and backpacks. The policy doesn't call for that kind of restriction, but our elementary schools were already doing that, right? Watches are still a bit of a concern. Current policy allows them to wear the watch, so that is still a place of concern for elementary school. And then they just made principals as a whole said, hey, just a little policy suggestion, can we clarify some language? Wireless devices are silenced and stored off the body. They want it to go all the way to like, it's not just silence, but it's away from the body, stored off the body. So they would like that addition, just like from their own feedback as principals. The committee really wanted information on consequences. What are your consequences? So this is a progressive discipline, what you see up there as far as like how the consequences are laid out. First offense in elementary, device goes like, you have your device and you're messing with it, it goes in the cubby, teacher communicates, it shouldn't be with them, but if it is, okay, put it in the cubby, teacher communicates with the child and the family, reteaches the expectations, and then the device goes home with the child at the end of the day. Second offense, same child does it again. Device goes to the administrator this time. Administrator communicates with the child and the family, reteaches the expectations, and the device goes home with the child at the end of the day. The only thing that changes from the second to the third is that now the device has to be picked up by the family. I will say that part of the feedback that this principal provided is that they just haven't really had to deal with these consequences. Like it's been one here, one there. This is not something that they're doing on the everyday basis because it's just really not a problem. They've been teaching this for a couple of years and they're in a really good place. But they do have this laid out in the event that it's needed. Yes, sir.
I read a report last week that the kids are using burner phones to get around this.
I read that report too.
Was that discussed?
We have not heard reports of that. Just because we haven't heard it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And I definitely don't want to say that we are perfect, that our students are perfect. It is not something that is a concern right now. Teachers are not reporting students using the phone, sneaking a phone during class. This is not something that's being reported K all the way to 12. Again, that is not to say that there's not an instance where something can happen. Absolutely, they're kids, right? They'll try anything. But it isn't something that has become a problem. In fact, what we're hearing in middle school and high school is since the implementation, which again, implementation began a couple of years ago for most of our schools. Since the implementation, they have seen less cyberbullying. Like that's one of the things that they provide, that they said. They've seen more attention, less distraction, more focus. Our schools are reporting that there's been good results from having the phones away. But again, remember, this is behavior that they've been shaping for a year or two already. So our middle schools administrator said that middle schools are in a good position, I guess better than what they had expected the first year of a policy, because they already had these practices in place, right? Before this policy. Less cyberbullying, students are more focused on academic work and the challenges. We asked them, like the committee wanted to know, what are some of the challenges? Some of the challenges are trying to monitor smartwatches, just like I said in the elementary one. Smartwatches and earbuds, more for the high school. Earbuds were not mentioned in elementary, but it is something that was mentioned in middle school. Again, this is a progressive policy that goes from first offense to like if the student continues, teacher redirects students in the first one, they'll say put it up, should be in the backpack, should be in the pocket, reteaching of expectations, and then device goes home with the student at the end of the class. So at the end of the class, they get the phone back. Second offense, teacher confiscates the device and takes it to the administration. Teacher and admin notify the parent and review expectations with the student, and then parents pick up the device at the end of the day. Third offense, the consequences escalate if it's a repeated offense, right? So if this is now your third time, you focus on shifts from device to a pattern of non-compliance. So now you're non-complying. So what are the consequences for non-compliance, right? And these are just our policies at schools. What happens if you're non-compliant over and over? You lose your privilege. Maybe your device is in the office during the day. You could get a demerit, a detention, ISS. So as the behavior continues, the consequences escalate for the student. Again, we asked a lot of questions to Dr. Patton about this, but Dr. Patton is the principal that represented high schools. And she said, they're not really dealing, like they're not in the office dealing with consequences on cell phones. Like it's minor infractions right now. Did you have a question?
Yeah, the Pew Research Center, at our last public meeting, a woman mentioned a study. If the student's phone is turned off, but it's within arm's reach, backpacks, pockets, that sort of thing, it is almost as distracting as if the phone is turned on. So was that considered?
I think that when our principals speak of their trends of less distraction, I guess what they're really focused on is, like when you think about classroom behaviors, right? You are attentive, you're looking at me, you're writing, right? I can sense that there's attention being given, right? As compared to before we had any kind of expectation in the classroom where students, like, you may not be writing or looking at me or looking at that paper and studying what I gave you. You might be kind of doing this, like flipping your phone, looking, having it on your lap, looking down, all the things that can happen when you have a cell phone. They're reporting better attention, less distractions. So they would have an audience that looks kind of like this, right? Where they can sense that there is more interaction, perhaps more conversations when they ask the students to turn and talk. They're reporting that has increased, right? That's not to say that there's any objection to the research that's out there. That research is good. It's great research. It's well done. A lot of it does say exactly what you're saying. But our schools are reporting better attention, less distractions, right? As far as like anecdotally what they're seeing. But thank you for that. Okay, administrators at the high school level. So increased student engagement in class, just kind of what I was just describing right now. Students have generally been receptive and compliant. So generally, again, not 100%, nothing's 100% when it comes to behavior in a high school, even middle school and elementary, that's hard. But generally, they're just not seeing students really push back. This is what I heard some of the principals say as I've heard them talk. They said, most students really do understand. They understand that they have been distracted, that they have been doing something that is taking them away from what they're supposed to be doing. So most understand why, and I think when adults understand why, they're more likely to engage in that and what's being asked of them, right? So students are understanding why, probably families are talking to them about why as well, and so they're just not getting a lot of pushback, and therefore the discipline issues are not very repetitive. Teachers appreciate the consistency both in schools and across the district. So teachers are grateful, schools are grateful for this policy because now the things that they have been doing are now reinforced with the policy. So that actually helps them to continue that work. Challenges. Challenges are trying to monitor smartwatches and earbuds. So now that's been said a few times, right, in every single slide, elementary, middle, and high. It seems like earbuds and watches are the biggest distraction or the biggest issue right now. Okay, same thing, progressively increasing as the behaviors are multiple instances. So teacher redirects students to put the device away, reteaching of expectations, device goes with the student at the end of the class period. Teacher admin notify parent and review expectations. If it happens again, parent conference is needed. And then the third offense, again, it's it increases as the students continue to do it, the consequences increase. So loss of privilege, it's in the office, detention, ISS, all those things. One thing that Dr. Patton did share is that unlike elementary where the parent has to come into the office to pick up the phone, they usually don't keep phones at the end of the day because a lot of our students are drivers. And so keeping that phone at the end of the day would pose an issue. So they don't ever keep a phone. If they may keep it in the office, but they don't keep the phone when the student goes home. They don't separate from the phone because of that issue. And but parents are called in if needed. Again, she's reported very little of that happening at all. High school considerations. High school, I'll tell you, was the place where it was most difficult. That was where the conversations were most robust, were at the high school level. Points to consider that they wanted us to share. High schools anticipate enforcement difficulties and increased resistance if restrictions are expanded to lunch periods. Right now, our policy allows for cell phone use during lunch. They anticipate, all principals are anticipating that if we go in the direction of restricting it during lunch, it's going to be difficult. The resistance will be difficult and the behaviors will increase. Concerns about student and parent communication, that was also brought up, and we'll talk more about that when we actually go through the recommendations. And then recommended clarity, they want to define consequences for noncompliance explicitly and ensure alignment across secondary schools. So this was one group that was interested in having consequences aligned and consistent across the district as part of our policy. We provided student feedback. This was not something that they asked for, but it was timely because Mr. Golden met with the Superintendent Student Advisory Council last week, and he was leading, I think it was the day before that committee work. So I got some feedback from Willie Dickerson, from Dr. Webb, from Mr. Golden about the feedback, because that was one of the topics at the Advisory Council. There are 3 students per high school in that group, in that advisory group. They meet quarterly, and they talk about different topics. The topic of cell phones, this is the feedback they gave. Cell phones are away during instruction. They're saying that by and large students are compliant. They said, we miss our phones because we used to take pictures of the board. We used to access district block dual enrollment assignments during study hall, and now we can't do that. We miss the organizational pieces that we were used to, like calendars on their phones and things like that. So those are the things that they report missing, but say that they're compliant and they understand, and by and large, the policy is being followed at schools. Hallways, they said hallways, no big issue in the hallways. It is more difficult to monitor, and sometimes kids are sneaking, and that it's really hard to monitor during the hallways, but they say by and large, kids are not in the hallway using cell phones. If there is one instance anywhere, a staff member sees the student, they tell them to put it away, students are compliant, and it stops. So they're saying there's no big issues there to report. Lunchtime, they gave some feedback on lunchtime. Students use it on lunchtime to communicate changes in after-school plans, activities, athletics, jobs, schedules, logistics. I'm waiting to hear from ACT. I want to check it and see if I got an email. I have several college applications out. I want to check my email and see if I'm getting anything back that's timely. That kind of, mostly from our upper classmen, that they're really reporting that they use it for communication. Now, most students also said, we're also socializing a lot during lunch. Like, we're talking, we want to talk to our friends. That's our only time to really talk to our friends. So the cell phone use is quick. It's to send a text, to communicate, to look at our email, but we're mostly talking and having a good time. Dr. Patton says that it is extremely loud during lunch at Independence High School because students are engaged in socializing. So, okay, here's a part where we talk about policy refinement. So that was just like leading up to what the recommendations are. You have a packet with you, and I want to point out that these are the different topics that the committee worked on. And then there was another one that just said, hey, what additional things do you want to say? So it was left open to additional, but we focused on this from conversations we heard at board meetings, conversations we heard at our meeting in May with our committee. Also, Tanya Hitma and Melissa Wyatt met with us, and we came up with like, what are some buckets that we know we want to have conversations about? Like, we don't want to walk away from that committee and say, oh, we should have asked about buses. So we put some things on there that we knew we wanted to discuss, but left it open enough that the committee could come up with anything. So we did like times during the day, places during the school, in the school building, and then language and policy. So we talked about buses, hallways during and after arrival, on campus, early arrivals, late pickups. During the school day, what about class change? What about lunch, study hall, additional areas that are not identified in policy? And then language. Those were some language pieces that I heard you all discuss heavily in that meeting this summer. Language like when authorized by teachers, devices are silenced. Devices are not used during the school day. So we wanted the committee to have conversations around that. So that's what you're going to see in this packet that was handed out to you. This packet has 3 handouts that look exactly the same. One is K-5, one is 6-8, and one is 9-12, okay? So I think there's a link. Oh, no, okay. This is kind of like the process, which I'm going to go through this really, really fast because I think I've talked a lot about this, but we set norms, we read, annotated, discussed policy. We went a lot through the policy, state policy and school board policy, annotated, asked questions, discussions, reported feedback from families, administrators, as I told you, all of that group. In grade band groups, we identified the areas that we might need refinement, discussed responses as a group, small groups, and then large group. And then we shared out with everybody. Every grade band shared out what their recommendations are with the group, and then the larger group got to ask questions, comments, and debate. There was some debate among committee members. I want you to know that when we walked into that room the first time, there were lots of different opinions. Just as we expected, just as it should be, just as we think it's going to be represented. There were lots of different opinions and ideas. This is kind of a miracle that happened. When we walked away, there was consensus reached on everything. I was expecting to bring you back, hey, we reached consensus here, but this is a place where we couldn't reach consensus. Didn't turn out that way. When they walked out of that room, they came in disagreeing on a lot of topics. By the time they left, they got to the point that after debating, reading research, hearing from our administrators, they really felt like they could come to a place of consensus. So everything I'm giving you is consensus. And actually, I had them write it. If you've reached consensus, write it, because that was really important that you knew that, whether it was a place of consensus or not. So I think the next slide has a link. I don't think I can actually go forward anymore, but there's a next slide that has a link that has these. It doesn't. Oh, there we go. Okay. If you could click that link for me, I just want to be able to speak. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. All right, so this is the way the sheet is laid out. The left-hand column has all of those buckets that I just read out to you. All the places in the school building, all the times during the school day, in addition to the wording on the policy. The next column says, does that need refinement, yes or no? So where you see no means the policy's fine as is. It doesn't, you don't need to add anything, change anything, it's good. If it says yes, it means we should refine this. And then it tells you on the right-hand column what kind of refinement they're asking for. So the very first one, I'll start with bus. No one, K through 12, thinks we should restrict it on the bus because they just don't think it's manageable for one bus driver to keep tabs on the phone. So no one felt we should do that. Hallway during, and so this one specifically, by the way, is K5, which is the first one you have. Hallways, no. It's like, let's not, they don't think that needs to be defined in policy. On campus, early arrivals, no. That should not. It's included within the basically what they're saying is we don't need refinement because it's included in the definition of the school day, right? So we don't need to do that. During the school day. Yes, sir.
So I think what I heard there was there were actually different principals at different schools actually had different. They like the current definition. It says during the school day. They define the school day differently. Some of them do door to door. Some of them do bell to bell for different reasons based on their school day. their request of us was, we like it the way it is, because right now we can have, it's slightly different, same definition. We get to have the autonomy to define the school day like we like, and as long as we're getting good results, then I mean, so that was the feedback that I heard there, which was actually fine with me. But I mean, but I wanted to share that.
Thank you. Thank you for that note. On-campus early arrivers and those staying late, same thing as above. They did not want to define that. Class change, none of those really, lunch, class change, and study hall really don't pertain. Like, they're not doing that in elementary school, and they feel like those nuances don't pertain to elementary. Like, they don't have a study hall. They don't really do class changes the way we think of in middle school and high school. They're always with their teachers as they walk from one place to another. And at lunch, it is not allowed in the current policy, and they don't want to change that. So they're fine with the way it is. This is where some of the recommendations begin. It's in some of the language. So in the language, when authorized by teacher for educational purpose, they said no, but they said clarify non-school issued laptop or tablet. What they were saying is, the policy talks about a wireless device, and they think that a Chromebook, which is a device provided by the school, is included in this definition. And although I think they understand it in practical terms to not be that, they just thought maybe we want to define that better. So they made that suggestion, but notice that they said, no, it doesn't need a change, but you may want to clarify that this policy doesn't include school-provided laptops or tablets or Chromebooks. Devices are silenced. Yes, they do want some refinement on this. So silenced, and add stored off the body. Because the way the policy reads right now, as we've said, you could have it on the body and be silenced and still be meeting the spirit of the policy. So they really want that more clearly defined. As the policy currently reads, the students could have it on the body if it is silenced. How would this be monitored during recess, lunch? So they can have it on their body silenced. They're worried about that elementary school students would be walking around with it at recess or at lunch, and then it would be harder to maintain the integrity of that policy. The next one, not used during the school day. They said no, they don't think that a refinement is needed, but they also said more clarification on what school day means. So I think they said no because they feel like they can manage what's there, but it may be nice to have more clarity on defining the school day. So determine when this would be appropriate. Additional areas not identified. They do want one additional area. They want to add clarification as it relates to earbuds and AirPods. And that's in line 7 and 8 of the policy. And then consequences, they don't recommend that we don't need to do anything about consequences as it relates to the policy. And then we asked the question, if refinements are made to this current policy, when should they be implemented? They recommend that we don't change anything mid-year and that we wait till 26, 27. They feel like they're in a really good place and they don't want to have to redefine anything mid-year. And then they wrote a note, because I asked them to tell us if consensus was reached or not, so they wrote a note there saying consensus was reached. Okay, middle school. They wrote their consensus on each and every one of those, so it's going to start that way. But no on the bus, they feel like that's something that we can't really manage. Hallway during arrivals and dismissal times, leave up to different schools to create policies. This is what we heard. Some schools don't allow it as they come into the hallway and at the end of the day, and some schools are okay with it as long as it's like before they get into class at the beginning of the day and as they're getting ready in the hallway, they'll have, they have it on them, they can see it. And so they said, no, we want to leave that the way it is so that each school can manage it the way they're doing right now. On-campus early arrivers and those staying late, hard to set a policy with all the different situations. When you think about a middle school, there could be students that are getting ready to go to their games, walking out of the school to go to the practice field. It would be really hard to manage that kind of like traffic and movement after school. During the school day, class change, no, they think it's fine the way it is. Lunch, it's fine the way it is. It's restricted in middle school, remember. So they're fine leaving it that way. Study hall, they're fine leaving it that way. So no changes there that they're recommending. And then the language on when authorized by a teacher for educational purposes, they would like a refinement there. They're saying need to define what an educational purpose is. So is it access to curriculum? Like, why would a student need a cell phone in the class? Why would a teacher give a student permission to use a cell phone? So they would like that defined if possible. Silenced, yes, they do want they do have a recommendation for silence. They wanted to say silence and not on the body, because right now, again, they can have it on the body. Devices not used during the school day, reached agreement that there is no change needed. Additional areas, they do have one additional area they want to talk about, and that is line 9 talks about, and I'll read it to you because I know you don't have the policy in front of you, but line 9 says, a student may, however, be permitted to utilize a wireless communication device unless under the following, utilize wireless device under the following circumstances. And then it gives you circumstances like an emergency, authorized by a teacher, manage students' health. They want that to say instead of may, shall. Because they're concerned that our students who need it to access, right, who need it for different purposes related to access, if it says may, it's really up to the school, and it really is the student's right under perhaps their 504 or IEP to have that. So they do want that changed to shall have access instead of may. Consequences, they don't really think we should do anything about consequences as it pertains to putting it in policy, and they prefer that if any refinements are made that we wait till 26, 27, based on the other information I gave you, just difficult to implement changes mid-year. Okay, and the last one is high school. These get to be really similar, even from K to 12, like no on bus, hallways, and on-campus early and late students. Like leave that just as is. Class time change, yes. They want us to clarify not used during the school day, including transition and passing periods. So even though the policy says it's implied in policy, they want it explicitly stated that it cannot be used during transition and passing periods. I think they just wanted more clarity, more teeth on that. Lunch, no. No change. No means no change. So right now, they're allowed to use it during lunch. They want to leave it that way. They don't want to change it to restrict it during lunch. Study hall, no change, because study hall right now is included in the school day. So right now, they're not using it during study hall. They want to keep it that way. Additional areas not identified. New wording, the only time the device may be used during the school hours is during lunch period for 9th through 12th grade students. So they want it explicitly stated when it's okay to use it so that so students understand it's not okay at any other time. Some were concerned that gaming devices were included and thought it should be removed. Let me explain that statement. Melissa, I know that was I was right there in your group. This is what I understand. She doesn't understand why a student, or that particular member didn't understand why a student would bring a gaming device to school. So I think that was a conversation, like why would we even have a gaming device, because that has no place in a school anyway, so why do we need to state that in policy? Am I right about that, Melissa?
Yeah, I was going to ask Dana, is that on the state law? Is that line from the state law? So it's line 8 in the policy. It says such devices include any portable wireless device that has capability to provide voice, messaging, or other data communication between two or more parties, such as wearable technology, cell phones, laptops, tablets, and gaming devices.
Pretty sure 98% certain. That's
Okay.
directly from state law. But
Okay.
let me double check.
Okay. I think the question was, what would that look like? And we were just talking about that would be like a Nintendo Switch or something
Right.
like that, not like a gaming.
Sure, like a smaller,
console.
like a
Yes.
smaller gaming
Handheld.
device. Yeah.
So, included.
And again, I don't think that this committee member didn't want the students to bring it. She just didn't think that has any place in school. Why would we even have that in policy? So When authorized by teacher for educational purposes, they didn't think that needed clarification. They were okay with that. Devices silenced, no change with that. They were okay with that. Not used during the school day. The only time the device may be used during school hours is during the lunch period, and that's already been stated in another place here. So they do want this aligned to the code of conduct. So state any clarification. This is the only group that really wanted this stated in the code of conduct. And it says, we like the consequences presented by administrators at the meeting and felt they were appropriately tiered for grades K-5, 6, 8. And so in other words, they liked what the elementary, middle, and high school had provided, and they want some sort of clarification on the policy. Now, they made some notes down here that they thought were important for you to see and to hear. So I'm going to read those to you. I know you can read them, but I want to read them just for clarity's sake in case there's something we want clarified. If refinements are made to the current policy, when should they be implemented? Refinements should be made at the end of the school year based upon recommendations and analysis of data about this year's enforcement. They had a desire to not begin changes, to not make any changes during the school year because they're too hard to implement midstream during the school year. So that was their desire. The high school group strongly feels that high school level students as emerging adults need opportunities for to practice age-appropriate independence and preparation for their imminent college and career paths. Additionally, high school students use their personal emails, phone numbers for communications from college applications, ACT, AP testing, jobs, etc. that our network security does not allow them to access. So they cannot access these sites, these different sources from a school device. Having the ability to access phones at lunch allows them opportunities to address any deadlines or other tasks associated with preparation for their post-graduation journey. We reached consensus in all areas, but they did have a question at the very bottom that they wanted to add. Some schools have students put phones in pouches or lockers. When they say pouches, they're talking about, they hang on the wall and they have numbers and the students put them in there. That's what they mean by pouches. Or they make them leave it in their lockers. Our policy just says that students may possess devices. Our team believes that pouches/lockers are beneficial for students. Can this be added to the policy, some kind of storage? I think this goes back to not having it on the body. So if we say don't have it on the body, I think they're concerned that the question becomes, well, where? Is it in the backpack? Is it on the floor? Off the body, they were kind of wanting a location. So if we say it has to be stored away from the body in a pouch provided in the classroom or in their locker, if we provide some clarity, it'll help them with the off the body part that they want to add to the policy. Okay, I've talked for a long time. That concludes the recommendations, but of course I'm happy to take questions if there's anything that you would like. Obviously, Melissa, I would want you to wrap up. If I missed something, did I forget something? Is there anything you want to add?
No. And while y'all are thinking about that, so yes, to your question, Melissa, including but not limited to cellular phones, tablet computers, laptop computers, and gaming devices.
Okay, thank you for checking.
That's why it's in there.
Okay.
Melissa, is there anything you wanted to add to the presentation, recommendations, anything that I missed?
No, thank you.
Okay. Well, I was just kidding. I'm not really done. Andy just said, no, you're not done. Okay. Thank you, Andy. Okay, next steps. So I just have one more slide. Next steps. Meeting October 14th. We're going to discuss instructional technology. We're going to have 2 meetings on that. Same format. We're going to provide research, resources. We're going to have questions that we're going to discuss. We're going to break up in grade bands, all the things we did. And the idea here is to lay out what instructional technology integration looks like, what's appropriate, what is the research on that, so then we can go into screen time as our next topic. Okay, and now I really am done.
So thank you very much for
Sure,
that. Very,
absolutely.
very thorough and detailed. We really appreciate it. Is it fair to say that the cell phone personal devices portion of the committee's work is done now? You're moving into the next phase?
That work is done.
Okay.
That is a recommendation. Now, I will say this. If there's something you need clarified that you need us to go back and ask the committee, I wouldn't want to do that via email because I don't think that that's fair to all participants. We would have to gather again. We do have that date, and we do have another topic, but if there were some work we needed to do, then we would be happy to do that. But at this point, I have told them, these are your recommendations, you write them. I even said things like, say it now, forever hold your peace, before they left, because I wanted them to know, like, that their recommendations, that work was finalized. So they feel it's finalized, they feel like they're in a good place. I think what was exciting was to see a process work the way that it did, with so many stakeholders that had so many differences of opinions and ideas to come together in a room, have discussions, debate difficult topics, and then walk away saying, okay, I can agree with this. This is where we like reach consensus. It was really incredible work. Yes, ma'am.
So I want to make a statement
Yes.
to that. First off, thank you for facilitating that.
Absolutely.
And I don't think parental involvement is ever going to be our issue. I think we just need to continue processes like this to open it up for our parents to be involved, to help us to solve these complex problems. So thank you so much, and I like to see this process continue. It's really informative.
Sure, it's very powerful. Thank you so much. Okay, thank you.
If I may, Mr. Chair, a couple thoughts related to where we go from here. Of course, this meeting and this conclusion was the night before last, so we haven't had time to drill through it and process it as well. A couple thoughts I have. One, Ms. Lopez addressed. I wanted you all to take some time to percolate on it and think about it. Second, we're going to have some discussion about the possibility of putting this on for discussion at the policy committee, so that we can drill through those particular recommendations. What I'm going to suggest is that Mr. Galbraith and Ms. Osbrooks have some discussion about that from a scheduling standpoint. I have a suspicion, based on my life experience, that when the board sits and talks about it, it will trigger some other discussions and maybe some questions related to that as well. And before that meeting, then we will, as an administrative team, have some discussions related to these recommended changes. It may give us a couple of prompts to think about as well. So that's my recommendation on next steps.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would add to that is it seems like the consistent recommendation across all three bands is that if we make changes, they be implemented at the end of the school year or for the next school year, if I'm reading that correctly. So not that we necessarily have to follow that, but that's what the feedback we're getting, right? And so I think it would mean that we would have time, plenty of time through policy committees and other discussions to think through what changes, if any, we want to make based on these recommendations.
So I guess I heard they did say that, but then you heard them say that the biggest pain points were they all said the wearables were an issue, and they were different across campuses. Some people allowed them to wear them, and some people, and so it might be worth looking at policy for some changes that we could make. I think what they meant, and I don't know that I necessarily agree, but it's for the board to consider, was, basically don't change the elementary, middle don't expect any changes anyway, but at the high school level, leave it like it is for the lunches. And my biggest kind of takeaway from hearing that discussion is it was good, and I think this, and even from the high school perspective, they put their rationale, but I think what they're combining the reason why they want to have no change with the solution to have the change. So they basically brought up a couple of things, which is we think the kids need to be able to access and have access to their phone so that they can check email and get text messages or communicate with their parents and maybe their employer. And then there were a couple of ancillary things about, the AP classes. And so I guess the only place where it missed a little bit for me, and what I would like if we were going to dig further in this, would be, are there solutions that address those problems that don't require them to have their phones during class changes, and that we can put them, if we did want to go away for the day, are there ways that we can mitigate and provide solutions for those things that they said were important? Because I don't think the solution outside of the last bullet that they said, where we think that kids should, we should be teaching them about being able to balance and prepare them for life afterwards, which is a little soft, but that, so everything else, what they don't say is the ramifications of that is, we think because we hear in the middle school and elementary school, it's great to have them away for the day, and we don't have any issues. We don't have any issues at lunch because the kids don't have their phones. What you didn't, I think we saw a little bit with the bus. They said, well, we don't recommend any changes because we can't police it. And so they didn't actually say that we think kids are better off with their phones on the bus. We said they're trying to come up, since they don't have a solution for it, they're not saying that it's a problem. And so if we framed it a little bit differently and just said, hey, what's your ideal, like, what are we trying, what's the problem we're trying to solve? Yeah, we really think that the bus, that our students would be better off if they didn't have the phones on the bus, but we can't. Like, it might be that we can't come up, like, we're supposed to, we're tasked with providing the solutions, and they were kind of combining the problem with the solution, when there may be more solutions than they presented us with the recommendation. So I'd love a chance to, just in policy, to kind of think through those things, because I think we've got the framework here, but I think I'd like staff to kind of think through too. Hey, when they've set out the problem, if there are ways to solve those things without having, because what they didn't say was, they said all the reasons why students need their phones, which is true, which I didn't disagree with any of those reasons why they might need them, but they didn't say the majority of time when the kids are using their phones, what are they using them for? And it's not talking to their employer, it's getting on their social media and bypassing the school's network and all the things that they actually do with the majority of their time, not the things that they need to do, and it might take them just a little bit. So that was my biggest takeaway, and I liked hearing the discussion. It was really good, but I think the consensus might have drowned out some of the nuances of what they were really looking for. That's it.
I'm gonna let Donna get in here with a comment.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Just to kind of dovetail on what Jay was saying, and sometimes it's a little hard doing this remote and I don't hear everything, but I sat with the high school group and I was really appreciative. Dr. Patton at Indy talked about how they ended up creating a cell phone zone at the front of the school because they found that once this policy went into place, it was a big jump and people needed to go to the bathroom. And they figured that they were going on their phones in the bathroom to check things. And I like the idea of them just creating a cell phone zone at the front. If you need to check on something, text your parents about something. And I was talking afterward with one of the committee members, because I think there has been, we see the data that the bell-to-bell really does help our kids, and keeping them off the phones. And to what Jay was saying, a lot of times, yes, they could access their phones to check in on after-school commitments, but sometimes they're just popping on for social media. And so I don't know, my daughter calls it brain rot, just getting on your phone and just like scrolling through Instagram. And to kind of prevent that at lunch or just kind of encourage socialization with your peers, maybe, and I was talking with one of the parents on the committee, is just having a moving lunch one day to being a cell phone zone at the front of school. If you need to hop on, go to there. But if you're sitting at the table with friends, let's encourage conversations. And it might be a slow rollout to something like that. But I like that idea of the cell phone zone. So you go to a certain physical place to hop on your phone and do things without, So just wanted to add that.
All right, thank you. Anybody else have any comments?
I just would echo Jay's sentiment, and I would like to see us discuss this at the October policy meeting. So.
One thing I was going to suggest about policy was whether, is there one, do we know, Dana, yet whether the October or the November policy meeting might have a lighter agenda, because this is going to generate, obviously, a fair amount of discussion. So just thinking about time, is one better than the other? Or do you know yet?
I can't speak for what's in November, but I will tell you, y'all are about to have two policies that we're going to spend a lot of time on. I've just gotten a request to bring back up the textbook adoption policy and this one. So
those
are two.
Two in addition to cell phone, or two?
Oh,
including cell phone?
no, including cell phone. Those are both going to
Okay,
be pretty
okay.
substantial.
But to be fair, Josh, if we talk about the textbook adoption for the first reading in September, it's also going to be in October. It's also going to be on November too. So I don't know that you're not going to avoid it by pushing.
True.
By pushing.
No, we're going to have both of them.
So one other policy that would have some substantial discussion.
Yes. So I guess my point of that is I think we can have them both on October, but probably not much else, because I do think they're going to be time consuming. And I think we have one policy that will be for second reading. So.
And no other new ones that we have to deal with that are
Not at this
more
point,
editorial
correct.
type.
I don't have anything. I don't have anything else from staff that we're recommending. So, just the two. Tony's requested the textbook and then cell phone. So, and that might be plenty for. It's actually going to be the last Monday in September. So it's in a couple weeks.
Okay, all right. Any other questions or comment, Drayson?
Yeah, I was just curious. Like, is this subcommittee that's reviewing this topic, are they finished with their work, or are we receiving more data from that particular group? And then, I guess because we need to have this prepared policy finished for August of next school year, right? Because we don't want to make any changes, is what I heard from the committee. Now,
I think they said the cell phone part of the policy or the committee's work is done. And then the decision for the board to make is whether we make changes in midstream in the current school year or wait till the year is over.
And
that's really the board's decision ultimately.
And the committee is continuing to meet on other topics. So Ms. Lopez did say if there were any particular clarification questions that she could bring them. Now that meeting is actually in October. So there will actually be a policy committee meeting before their next meeting.
okay, thank you.
All right, anything else on that topic?
I'll just say the committee is committed to meeting monthly. Like, we already have our meeting dates until May. So if you feel like that it would be helpful at some point to go back to the committee, we can just work on the timing of that. So.
Okay, that's a good point. All right, Jason, next item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, this the presentation we're going to give you right now is not something you need to make a decision on right now, and it actually is potentially related to what Dana just mentioned, related to the textbook policy. You may recall that last year we made it a point to give you monthly updates on the textbook adoption process for science. This presentation from Ms. Sauer includes information related to the upcoming adoption process that is substantially smaller from a content perspective, some CTE and health and PE textbook processes. The focus point I would like you to think about, which actually is a good segue to the board talking in policy committee, is proposed changes to our process based on our experience the previous year. And I'm going to toss out one that I think I sent with you in an email as an example because I see it as the most significant change. We already intend to include in the teacher preference form a cell or a location for them to explain why they're recommending a particular text. So with that, I do encourage you, when Ms. Sauer gives you this presentation, focus on that question in your minds. What changes might you want to see as we go through this process? Final piece, social studies is next year. So the work we do in these next few months is going to have a significant impact because social studies is going to be much more involved from a content perspective. So, Ms. Sauer.
Perfect. Thank you. So this is going to be a content-wise a much smaller textbook adoption. We are doing just a few CTE courses and then health and PE. So we're going to kind of talk through what will this adoption involve. As a reminder, we do follow all of the state codes and then our own WCS board policy when we look at textbook adoption. I thought it might be helpful to put all of those links on the one slide. You may remember that halfway through the adoption process last year, the state actually set up a brand new website that is just devoted to the textbook adoption process. So that first link goes straight to that website. The link underneath that is a page on that website that the state set up that is a link to all of their laws, rules, and policies. And then it kind of starts to get narrower from there. So the process that we're about to talk through is our own local board adoption, which is outlined by, that's the state code that outlines the local board adoption. And then underneath that is our WCS board policy. As a reminder, we do adopt all of our instructional materials by a cycle set by the state. So we're in 25-26 right now, which means that we are adopting PE and health science. And then you'll see if you scan through, we actually are going to continue to adopt CTE basically until we ran out of slide space. So we adopt a few courses in CTE really every year for the foreseeable future. There are so many courses that fit into that CTE catalog. Rather than clumping them, the state kind of distributed them to make it a little bit more digestible, I think maybe for districts and maybe for their own review process. Yes.
So on here, it says state materials adoption 24-25. So you already have the list of textbooks
We're
to
in
be
the
reviewed
process. So
from the textbook committee.
we don't, sorry, I'm jumping to the slide because it's in here. Let me actually back up a little bit before where this slide picks up. So publishers submit materials to the state. It's usually like mid to late spring is when the state takes that. So the state got all the materials from the publishers probably like February-ish. They put together their own state committee to vet those materials. That vetting happens through the spring and sometimes into the summer. On August 15th, the first round of materials that passed state vetting was announced. Then the publishers who didn't pass that state vetting have an appeal process. So we're like almost at the end of that. Tomorrow is the day that they have to submit for appeal. And then any materials that got submitted for appeal get reviewed again by the state committee. It's usually November is when we get that final list.
So Jen, from
Yes.
I'm just trying to put my arms
Yep.
around this. There's a larger group right now that the state will probably shrink down until in January. Is that a good?
It should be
thumbnail?
November when we
Okay.
find out,
Okay.
but yes, correct.
I purposefully asked that question
Sure.
because, and maybe somebody or you all know, like, how can we help you all to get that timeline actually in that timeline? Because if you already had the books now, like you
Yes.
could already, but, because that's what we ran into with the science adoption,
Correct.
right? And it's
Yeah.
just a perpetual cycle. So if you all ever think of thoughts on how we might best support you, maybe
Yeah.
going to the State Board of Education or, because I think that would even make your job easier, because I know you get that time. And then we get December, well, that's holidays, so, yeah.
I know.
So to that point, as I understand it, correct me if
So-
I'm wrong, we don't have the books, and the publishers are not yet giving copies to LEAs, but
No.
there may be a way for us to find a way to get a hold of them somehow, some way. I don't know, some of them may be just, I don't, maybe they just publish a couple just for the state purpose. I
Well,
don't know the
here's,
answer to
I'm
that.
going to give you two pieces of information because I think I can address that question in two different ways. The first piece is that this actually picks up at what I would almost consider the tail-ish end of the adoption process, which actually starts years ago. So the very first step in the process is that the state puts together a committee to review the standards. That's usually 2 to 3 years before we get to the adoption of the materials. So they review the standards, they decide what changes they want to make to the standards. Then those standards get kind of handed out to publishers so that publishers then can take the time they need to create and align materials to those new standards. Then the materials get handed to the state for vetting. So it's like this picks up at a place, we're almost in midstream of the process. So to Margie's question about like, hey, how do we speed this up? Even here isn't the place where it starts. It actually starts way back here. And so I think what would cause that process to speed up would be going all the way back several years to get through all of those steps. And those are all things that the state does. To answer the question about what about the materials that have been submitted to the state? So the state has traditionally posted on that website, this one. If you go to that top link, there's a page on that site that is digital samples of the materials that were submitted to the state. My caution to you, just to remember that those are things that were submitted, they're not necessarily going to pass. So there may be things that are on there that aren't going to pass state vetting, but they are available to start getting that initial look at them. Does that kind of help answer both of those questions? Okay.
Doesn't the issue...
That was my question. We can get a list of what has been submitted
Correct.
to the state.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
But doesn't the issue really come down to the value of us, any of us, staff or board members, spending time on materials that may not ultimately be on the approved list? Like, isn't that really the core of the issue?
We have traditionally not had teachers start reviewing materials before we know it's going to pass state vetting. Because of that, we just don't know. If it doesn't pass state vetting, it isn't something that we would consider for adoption. And so then it becomes, I spend a lot of time reviewing a material that ultimately isn't actually going to meet the needs of the students in the classroom because the state has determined, hey, this material doesn't actually meet what we've set as our minimum requirements for what would make this an acceptable instructional resource.
But the possibility for accelerating might be that window when we know what their list is, but we don't yet have the books in hand. That might be the potential possibility for accelerating.
It's possible, so I'm not gonna say no. It is, last year, let me tell you, the kind of just the way that laid out, we got the list from the state Friday afternoon before Thanksgiving break. So we got the list that Friday. Valerie immediately reached out to the publishers and we started getting the materials as soon as we possibly could. But if you think about it, it's holiday season at that point, right? So it's Thanksgiving break. Right, exactly, yeah. Right, yes. It gets tight there, it does.
I will, let me make one comment related to Jen's description of the back scheduling. We know that, I'm thinking about social studies because that's where the rubber's really going to meet the road for us. They have been, if I'm not mistaken, over the past year reviewing the standards.
I think they completed that work last year.
Yeah,
yes.
okay, so they spent a couple of years, they've established the new standards. I'm wondering, and I know who to ask, is it possible to move up their approval by a month or two for the social studies? And to your question, Dr. Johnson, I think that's a question we can ask. I will probably see the chair and the vice chair of that committee next week at the state TDOE superintendent's meetings.
And just, I mean, honestly, and I know you got this from their website, I mean, this looks deceptive, right? It looks like they have the approval done, the state materials are approved. If I look at this, I'm thinking May 2025.
Yeah, and this,
Right?
to your
But it's
point,
really
you're exactly
November
right. This is the
2025.
way the state
6 months
lists
later.
that
Yeah, no, I know,
information.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, and like I said, if there's anything, I'm happy to talk to people, reach out to people, because, I mean, we're not the only district affected by this, for sure.
Because my background is in the social sciences, I'm going to be on top of this. Today, I downloaded the new standards, and they also have a document that shows the difference between the old and new standards, line by line, page by page. So there are some things available if you want to take the time. I'll be doing it because it's personal interest, but
And the hope is that the publishers are doing that too, right? And starting to create materials that align with the Tennessee standards for next year already.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about health and PE. So there's a little bit of clarification that I want to make sure that you know, because there's the potential that you could get some questions about it. And so I want to make sure that you know the same communication that we're giving to our principals, to our teachers, to anybody who asks us about it. The first piece, maybe it's first on there because we just had our family life public meeting here just a couple of days ago, but I wanted to make sure that everybody understood the difference between when we talk about health standards, we are not talking about our family life curriculum. They are two different things. So if you get any questions at all about, hey, what is this adoption change about our family life curriculum? They're not really related to each other. There is a little bit of overlap. If you imagine a Venn diagram, there's probably a tiny sliver where there is a tiny bit of overlap, only that some of the health standards we have incorporated into that family life portion of instruction that the students receive, but it's like this much of it. So as we talk through this health and PE adoption, this isn't going to affect family life at all. Here's what this looks like in the different grade bands. There are health standards K through 12. So if we look at the way those get distributed in instruction for students in each grade band, in K to 5, those health standards are relatively minimal. The link there is to the new health standards that go into effect this upcoming year. They're not substantially different from what we have right now, but just like every course, they do get a slight revamping, refreshing, and so that is the new health standards that'll go into effect next year. We have kind of a crosswalk, a spreadsheet, if you will, that we go through each health standard and we confirm where in an elementary student's day is that particular health standard addressed. Some of them get addressed in PE courses. Some of them, minimal, but there's a couple that actually get addressed through the science curriculum. And some of them get addressed through the sessions that counselors come and do with classrooms. And so because there isn't one unified place where we address all those health standards at the same time, our health and PE curriculum specialists and our teachers have all said, we don't see the need for a health curriculum in elementary school. That feels like it's backed up by communication we have from the state, only in that the state did not receive any materials at all for elementary school for health standards. So we're not intending to have any adoption at all for elementary school. For middle school, they're kind of in between. So there are middle school health standards. In middle school, we teach a single 9 weeks course rotation. In most middle schools, it's PE. We have 2 middle schools that actually teach health as a rotation. Again, the state did not receive any materials at all for middle school, so we're gonna do just a local adoption for that. What we did is we went to who are the publishers who submitted materials to the state for high school for lifetime wellness, and we just asked them, do you have middle school curriculum? So we're starting to gather that for our local adoption. Okay, and then in high school, our health curriculum is our lifetime wellness course. It is a single year course. It is a graduation requirement, so every single student will take it. It is the course that the state is receiving and vetting materials for, and so we'll do our adoption off of that state list. Questions about that? Okay. For CTE, I didn't give you the whole list. If you're interested in it, I'm happy to give it to you. It's long. What we talk about in CTE is what are the programs of study we're adopting for. So this rotation, we're adopting for the programs of study of information technology and advanced manufacturing. These are a series of elective courses. They're taught in scattered middle and high schools across the county. So no high school teaches all of the courses that are involved in this. Most high schools teach some of them. There's a little bit in middle school, and they're all electives, so they're not courses that every single student takes. We just looked at this. Does anybody have any more questions about kind of where we are in the state process? Perfect. So I'm not going to read through every bit of this, but this is kind of like a big overview of our process, and then we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about the steps that are most immediately coming up. So we're right now working on putting together our textbook committee. Our intention is to have that finalized by in this September, and then be able to get that in front of you for the October board meeting for approval. In the meantime, we'll be doing the steps like identifying which schools are going to house materials for review. We're going to be setting up our dates for our public reviews that are going to be here at the PD Center. We'll be waiting anxiously for the list from the state that should come in November. And then if you remember, once we get the materials, we go through that review process with teachers and with the committee through January and February. In February, every teacher of the course is going to get an electronic form to submit, and this is a change that Mr. Golden was alluding to. The teachers are going to be asked not only what is your selection of material, but give us a rationale. What was the criteria that you chose? What made this material stand out over the others that you were comparing? We're going to capture all of that information, and that'll be provided to the textbook committee members before they make their selection, and then to you all as we pass that recommendation from the textbook committee on to you. And then we move through the next steps, which is once the materials get final vote and approval, we do the ordering, we put them on our website, and then we start training our teachers on those resources.
I think that.
Yeah.
Yeah, on these committees, I just wondered why we can't have board members involved in this on the committees to speak with parents, teachers, and be more of a part of this in the beginning process rather than just getting a rundown, you know, in the last few weeks of where we're at, who said what, and, you know, the whole ball of wax.
So actually, I'm going to jump to this next slide because another change that we're making, and we want to make sure that it's really clear to everybody here, this slide is, here are the 4 meetings that we have already set on the calendar for the textbook committee to meet. And I want to invite all of you to attend any and all of those meetings that you're interested in attending. We can send you whatever information you need about when is the meeting going to be. They're all held here right at the PD Center. This is kind of a quick summary of what are we doing at each of those meetings so that you can kind of know, like, hey, it is big picture, I know, but here's the intention of what's happening at each of those. I will say for that third one, I apologize that I can't right now give you a date. That's the date where the publishers come to us to present to our committee. I can't commit to a date because it's dependent on those publishers, you know? So I will, I'll tell you that the reason the 16th and 20th are on there is that I already have a secret room reservation for this room. So I'm really hoping that I can convince the publishers to come one of those 2 days. But I really, until we know who they are and we're able to have some communication with them, that's the one date that I can't control yet. But the others are already marked on the calendar. And I do want to invite you all to be here as part of that is being able to observe all of those committee meetings.
So, Mr. Cash, we can put a board member on as a non-voting member. We intend to do that. And second, we want to make sure that we do a better job of informing everybody of when those meetings are and invite all of you to come to all those meetings to monitor those or listen in on all those discussions as much as you can. The reality is, chances are, you'll probably be in and out.
Should we discuss a policy for that?
Just wait till next month.
Yeah, there you go.
It's
Yeah.
it's
I already
next
have
month.
it. Yep.
Well, I think that'd be great.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I know it can wait.
Yeah.
Well, Tony has requested officially that it be brought up at the policy committee next
Okay.
month for discussion.
All right.
That specific policy.
So Dan,
All right.
to your point, if we make any changes in the policy, it'll be effective by the time, it would
Right.
have, we could talk about whether it could be effective by
Right, but
November
she's the one
necessarily, but certainly
I
certainly-
just think it's very important that board members get involved more on the front end than wait till the back end and start asking questions. I spoke with different groups after the science curriculum decision, both independently and in groups. And the first question they asked is, well, why don't you ask us? Why didn't you ask the teachers? And I believe it was the 14th, there's which you've got on there for the 16th to 20th. We never even get to see a presentation from the vendors. We never go in and sit in these meetings and collaborate with teachers and and principals. And they send representatives to these meetings and they go back to their schools. There's no reason board members couldn't go to one of their schools in their district and listen to the dialogue that's going on and ask questions. That's one of the first things, but according to the regulations, we're not allowed to gather, more than, 2 at one time.
Unless it's a public meeting that we announce. That's
right.
Yeah.
So that left us out of the whole picture, and it's just important that board members get out there and hear it, from the teachers and hear it from the principals and why this will work, why this won't work. Rather than, and our curriculum people try to do the best they can to explain, but it's not the same. It's not the same. We're responsible to pay for this, we're responsible for the curriculum, but yet we have no input until it's the end of the session. Okay? And that's all I want, and I'm glad you got it on there, because that's what I was gonna bring up tonight, is to put that on for policy. Thank you.
So I just have something real quick. I love the develop criteria checklist.
Yes.
And one thing I'd like to see is when it's sent out to all teachers, that they also get to see that. I just wanted to make sure that was.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And that is actually a process that we followed for the last several years, but I appreciate you pointing out that that's an important thing for everybody to know. Yeah.
So Josh, have y'all talked about the method of selecting the parents? Because I think there's a lot of, probably fewer this time than all the different science curriculum, but
We have not yet.
We have not yet.
Okay, because I really like being able, and I don't know if you don't need 12, I just don't know how many members, but I think like rotating that or doing something, I think it really helped with the engagement with I think with the board and the technology committee, was having that person that if we're not there, at least we have one person that we know that can kind of communicate back to us. That was really helpful. I'm not saying that those have to be the only parents on the committee either. Like if there need to be 10 and half come from the board, half come from the schools or PTOs or whatever, like that's fine. It's just nice to have a connection there.
It's a good suggestion.
Yeah, to that piece, excuse me, go ahead.
Can we be sent a link to the 2 briefings we've seen tonight?
Oh, yes. We've already placed those on the website. We sent you this email, this maybe 2 days ago, or yesterday, just a day or two ago. The one related to the Screen Time Committee was just finished today. So, but we've posted them, so the public has access to them.
Yeah, to actually speak to the question about parents serving on the textbook adoption committee. So our current process that we're actually working through, like as we speak, is gathering information from the schools. So what we do is we reach out to each middle school and high school principal. If we were adopting for elementary, they would be in the list. It's just this year we're only middle school and high school. And we ask each principal. In this instance, we've asked them to nominate 2 different parents, because we kind of had an internal conversation and we said, hey, these are such diverse content areas that we're adopting for, right? It's not like we were just adopting science, health and PE, and then those CTE courses have such a different focus. We really felt like it was best to try and get parents that could potentially represent both of those areas. And so we've asked principals to submit to us parent names, one for health and PE, and then one for CTE. What I can't speak to right this minute, because we're still in the process of getting those names, is every single school actually going to send us a name, one person for health and PE and one for CTE? We'll have to kind of see once we've gotten all the responses back. I don't know that piece yet.
And Jay, we'll have that discussion about board members as well.
Okay. Kind of in the background as we're formulating the rest of the committee is when we're going to just be studying all those times that teachers, that principals, that you all as board members, that parents and community members have to be able to review those materials. We are tied a little bit to that state adoption process, and so it is going to be until we have that list from the state that we're really available to start gathering those materials to set up those review dates. But what we tend to do is set 5 sites around the district that are set up for teachers to be able to review those materials. And then, as you remember, we receive a set that gets set up here at the PD Center, and we set up a variety of dates and times to accommodate as many schedules as we possibly can for parents and other community members to come here and review those materials as well. Okay. And then this is kind of the things we talked about. So in October, we should have the list of the committee members to put before you all for approval. Our first textbook committee meeting will then happen on November 3rd. That is preliminary work. So I want you to know that that date is intentionally chosen before the materials are released from the state. So we think it's really important that as teachers and committee members are thinking about what makes a valuable instructional resource, they're not running that through the lens of the materials that are in front of them. We really want them to be thinking outside of a particular resource, but thinking about the intention of the course. What makes a resource valuable for me as an instructor, as a parent thinking about the value of the resource for their student? So developing those criteria checklists before we actually see the materials, and then having those checklists to be able to review the materials through the next steps of the process. As always, we'll continue to come here and report to you every month that we have a board meeting, and always know that you can reach out to us if you have any questions about anything. Anything else?
So as a preface to the policy committee meeting, what we're talking about is changing teacher forms, the discussion of the committee makeup, board members, making sure that you all are invited to all the meetings and have that opportunity. We can implement many of these even while the policy is in process. So you all may have some others as well that we can add.
Thank you very much. All right, you want to hit your final superintendent's report item?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the interest of just dragging the superintendent's report out even more, I want to mention one final thing the county commissioner asked. I mentioned to you there were two things. Commissioner Paul Webb mentioned that he had found U.S. News and World Report's report on high schools, and he actually dug through the list and found all the Williamson County high schools, and he started rattling them off at the county commission meeting. And I thought the stats on this were quite interesting. Every one of our high schools were in the top 10% of U.S. News and World Reports for statewide. Every single one of our campus schools. So it was neat to hear that a commissioner did that and did the digging. Fairview, I think, was at the 90.8 percentile and on up. I actually am going to be speaking to the Fairview Chamber of Commerce next week. I'm going to mention that. It's kind of neat. The criteria that U.S. News and World Report uses for high schools includes college and career readiness statistics, college curriculum, achievement data on state testing, and what they call proficiency data, which I think is what we think of as TVAS or growth data. And finally, they factor in what they describe as underserved populations and how they perform, which includes economically disadvantaged and some of those subpopulations that are based on race. So those are real criteria that they use. So it was very neat to hear that. And with that, Mr. Chair, my report is finished.
Okay. On the upcoming October annual agenda items, is there anything to hit there?
Lydia, actually, I think we did the October annual agenda items.
They're down at the very bottom. It'll be approval of the TISA accountability report and approval of the textbook adoption committee.
Okay.
For the adoption.
So we touched on that when Ms. Sauer was talking about the textbook adoption. The TISA report is a compliance document that we fill out that'll be coming to you in October. But Mr. Chair, I mentioned this already, the November meeting, we will be bringing in October the draft five-year capital plan. Not for a vote, but just as a preface.
Right, and we will also have the vote in October on superintendent goals as well.
That's correct. Superintendent goals and as you and I placed the affirmed strategic plan and board goals, that will be a companion.
Yep. Okay. The only thing I have for board chair report is just as a reminder, on Monday night, we have our annual obligation to do the election for board chair and vice chair. So everyone's had a chance to participate in that process at least once. So just as a reminder, what will happen is at the beginning of the meeting, Jason will be in the chair seat and will preside over that process. Names will be put in nomination for chair. Each board member will be called by name to vote for chair. Once that vote is done, names will be put in nomination for vice chair, and then each board member will be called on to vote for vice chair. And once that process is done, then the chair will take the seat of chair and preside over the remainder of the meeting. So anyone have any questions about that process? Okay, let's move on to new business. We've got 5 items under budget that are budget related. Ms. Farmer, I'll just let you walk through those one by one and take it from here.
Thank you. The first item tonight is the Public School Security Grant. This particular one has a carryover amount from the prior year of $8,319, and then our current year's allocation of $847,000 for a total combined of $855,618. This will continue projects that have already been working on for several years that we knew would be in implementation, including inside laminate, some of the locking features inside, those kind of things. The next item is the United Way grant. This is the 14th year the United Way has given us funding for tutoring for our elementary school students, and the allocation for us this year is $59,525. The next item is the state transition grant for our transition students. Again, this grant runs from October to September, and so the allocation for us is $220,833 for the year. The next item is just carryover from the prior years related to the Innovation School Models grant that we received to do the Innovation Hub that we are currently in the process of building. The carryover amount for this year is $10,234,529, and we'll continue that construction project.
Will that amount cover the remainder of the cost of construction of that facility?
For construction, a little bit of this also has some equipment in it. If you look at the resolution, there's a couple $100,000 related to equipment, but it would be the construction equipment.
So we do have a little bit of contingency mixed in, and that has the potential to help with funding some operational expenses related to it if we don't need the contingency funding for the project.
Okay, and the last one?
The last item is the state education preschool grant, again, state grant, and our allocation for this year is $677,520.
All right, any questions on any of the budget items?
Mr. Chair, if I may give one piece related to that last, the state special education preschool grant, that is what we call early childhood. There has been a lot of discussion among school districts across the state with some of their legislators that those programs are not included in TISA. That is something to keep in mind, that there's no relationship between the amount of money we get and the need, if that makes sense. It's substantially less than what we actually spend on that program.
Okay, next.
I do have a quick question,
Yeah,
though.
go ahead.
Well, I guess because they're special ed, they have services, but like, we're not obligated to provide pre-K for all kids, and, right?
Two different issues. So this particular grant is what they call special education pre-K. We do not have an obligation to provide voluntary pre-K to all students, but any student with a disability, age 3 or 4, we do have that obligation. And we must include peers. So our services are actually twice the number, basically twice the number. So yes to your question related to voluntary pre-K.
Let me just say too, just as to praise it, because my son did it last year, and I can't speak for everywhere that has it, but Fairview Elementary was a fantastic program, and those teachers and those assistants are phenomenal people, just in every way. Absolutely loved it. Prepared him so well for kindergarten this year, and yeah, it's essential in my mind, particularly for those students that need it. So
thank you for that.
Can't sing enough praises about Fairview Elementary.
Thank you for that. From the basics of reading to behavior to going to visit the library, the whole scope of getting those students as prepared as possible for kindergarten is impressive. Thank you for sharing that.
Okay, approval of the 2026-27 budget preparation calendar. Ms. Farmer?
It's time again, folks, to start looking at the budget for next year. And so the first piece of that, we just finished, right? I know. But no, this piece is just putting a calendar in place that lays out a timeline of the different steps related to that. And so it's a requirement, an annual requirement, agenda item requirement. So the calendar's there for you to review, and we are getting started next week.
You got a whole, like, 2 or 3 month reprieve from budget.
Sure. We were wrapping up the year and getting started, and we're trying to finish off.
At least in talking to us about it, you did. Okay, board policies, there's one for first reading, 3.202, emergency preparedness plan. Dana?
Yes. So this is for first reading. There are a couple of changes in red after the policy meeting and some reworking of the language. So this was a policy that was recommended by Tanya. And so what we have done to change it is superintendent or his or her designee shall conduct an after-action review of an event, including a major incident, major accident, and/or a major response at a school or schools. And I believe Donna wanted some language in there with a time frame. So looking at TDOE guidance, the language that they have is as immediately after the event as possible. So you'll see those two changes. And then the last sentence was deleted because we have reworked those lines, 9, 10, and a little bit of 11.
Okay, any questions? And that will be for first reading, so there'll be a second reading as well. All right, then there's 5 policies that are first and final. You want to run through those?
I will. So these are all legal changes through the last legislative session. Waited on those until September because we had so many in August. Public Acts of 2025, chapter number 275, is the public chapter with all of the charter school changes. The biggest change in the application process is instead of the Department of Education receiving and creating the forms, the State Board of Education, in coordination with the Tennessee Public Charter School Commission, will be creating those forms, and that you will see is the trend as we go through this. What was oftentimes the responsibility of the department is now the responsibility of the state board. There's an update to include when the application needs to be provided, which is on or before 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time on February 1st. So those are the recommended changes on charter school applications. The next one, is charter school oversight 1903, and the change on it is the last page. There's now the authorizer reporting and review that was the Department of Education is now the State Board of Education. And if we have a charter school and then we have an annual authorizing report, we would also need to make that report available on the district's website. So those are the changes for 1903. The next one is the charter school intervention and charter school revocation. There's a notice change on page 2 where we would, if we have a charter school and we vote to renew, not renew, or revoke that charter school agreement, we would need to provide information about that decision to the department as well as the Tennessee Public Charter School Commission. It's the only change in that policy. And the last charter school is 1905, charter school renewal. And again, at the beginning, interim review, there were guidelines created by the Department of Education, now by the State Board. And there is now, with a charter school renewal, if we had a charter school and then it was renewed, then we would have, there's now a reporting for any renewal application that we need to report to the Tennessee Public Charter School that we have received the application within 10 days of receipt. And then a renewal criteria, again, we need to communicate that with the Department of Education as well as the Commission. So all legal changes, which is why they're all recommended for first and final. you want me to go ahead to the threat assessment? Okay. So the last policy for first and final is the threat assessment team, and that is policy 3.204. There was a change in public chapter 215 that there is a requirement in state law now for reporting. And just to be clear, we were already reporting a lot of information to our parents and guardians regarding a investigation that was occurring at the school. So I don't know that our parents or guardians will see much difference, but we now have a mandatory reporting that the language in the policy mirrors state law, and that notification needs to occur within 48 hours if we have credible information regarding a threat or significantly disruptive behavior directed towards or occurring on our school grounds. Then the parents and guardians of the kids who attend the school would receive a notification, just like they did last year. One other piece is that there is at least once a quarter, superintendent of schools will provide the board with the total number of incidents requiring notice to parents under this new law. You'll have a number for the respective quarter as well as a total for the year to date.
And as a FYI, Mr. Chair, the law says I will provide you with a number. I'm not just going to send you an email with 7. I'm going to make sure that you have a little bit more detail than that about those particular incidents.
Greatly appreciated.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to take us back, unless there's questions on any of those, I'm going to take us back to 3.202 on emergency preparedness plan. Donna had a question, and I didn't catch it before we moved on. So Donna, you want to jump in?
Yeah, thank you for that, Josh. I like the changes. I think in the meeting, and if I'm the only one who has an appetite for that, then this is fine. I like as immediately after the event possible. I think we did discuss putting in like a time frame, like 36 hours, 48 hours. I don't know if there was a reason. I can't remember back, but is there an appetite for us to add in like by 36 hours or 48 hours? Or do we just want to leave it kind of open-ended immediately, but not,
Don, I'll speak to that a little bit. You had mentioned
Yeah.
that you had specifically mentioned 48 hours as a possibility.
Yeah.
My immediate thought was there may be some incidents, depending on the severity, that it may be hard to get the right people together that quickly.
Right.
And that was a concern I had. Some simple ones that are school exclusive. I think you probably could get that done, but if we needed some law enforcement personnel or first responders involved, I was worried about us 100% committing to a 48-hour window.
I could see that. Okay.
All right, any other questions on any of those policies? All right, we'll move on to item E, approval of collaborative conference team. Mr. Golden?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Annually, we recommend the management team for the collaborative conferencing. That is the relationship we have with the Williamson County Education Association. Just as a quick reminder, every 3 years, the teachers go through the process of choosing whether somebody and who will represent them in creating an MOU that addresses salary, working conditions, and benefits. So that this request includes the management personnel. The law actually allows us to go from 7 to 11, up to 11 participants, and then the number that we choose, the WCA in this case, has the power to match. So we have traditionally kept it at the 7.
Any questions?
So, Jason, this is a new adoption this year, or is it? It was just unclear. It said we're in the first year, but are we adopting
Thank
it?
you for that. We are in the first year, so this next one will be to discuss year 2.
Gotcha.
One question I have is, during our planning session in August, we were talking about maybe trying to find some creative ways to change salary schedules and things. So would it, do we need board representation? Because would that need to be, I guess, worked out with them, correct? If we were going to try to change the teacher, particularly the teacher salary schedule?
Yes, we do have an obligation to talk to teachers about any potential change to teacher pay. The board representation, it's probably worth us doing a double check on the law.
Well, and if I could, I'll kind of walk through where a concern is. Ultimately, board members, you are going to be responsible for any changes, approving any changes to a memorandum of understanding. So any changes that are negotiated with the team that you're going to vote on, and then the professional educator team, there will be a memorandum of understanding. My concern is there is a separation of powers there. Your power is to approve members to negotiate, but then it's also your power to approve the MOU. I think for a board member, if they were serving on that team, it would be very difficult for them to then vote for an MOU that they negotiated. In addition, remember, one of your other duties is granting of tenure. So my concern is there could be some conflicts that we don't even foresee at this time. I will tell you, since I have been here, we have not had a board member on the collaborative conferencing team for the professionals. I think often because of the potential conflict that could arise later on. So that's my caution. If that is something that y'all want to do, please let me know. I'll do a deeper dive because the law conflicts. There's some definitions where there's some conflicting definitions, but the separation of powers is what has me a little concerned, because I want y'all to be able to, everybody to be able to vote with the duties prescribed by law.
My big question is that if we start looking at the path of a merit-based pay, I don't want us to not be able to get it approved because we weren't in this process, and it may not be the same. That's a great question, and so that's a statutory responsibility of the board. I still believe because of the collaborative conferencing, the recommendation would be absolutely we would discuss that during the conferencing, but I don't want to say that would be. So I'm glad you mentioned that. That's a good point. Sure, I'll do a little more research before Monday evening.
So Jason, if you can address that, because my read on that and what we've discussed before is that any changes that we make through because things could change through the budget process or whatever. So if we are going to make a change, our requirement under the MOU is just that we discussed it with them, which is essentially you and with the WCEA.
That is correct.
It's not the board necessarily. It's
right.
You as our representative. Right?
We have an obligation under PECA to discuss pay issues with those representatives, and so a lot of it's going to have to do with timing, to make sure that we plan ahead.
But Margie, I think I just want to be clear. It's not that we get. It's not approval. It's not a negotiation. It's Jason has to discuss it. It just can't be out of the blue. We can't just blindside them. So it's got to be, and we can't do much out of the blue anyway because it's a public meeting, and so Jason's going to have a conversation outside of the public meeting.
You're really touching on the key difference between what happened years ago, if some of you have experienced that, and now. The MOU requires a discussion. The old structure was a negotiated contract, and that's the difference. Yeah.
All right, any more questions on that? Item F is approval of board parameters for the 26-27 school calendar. And before you take this, I'm going to ask a question, which is, we don't have, I think your memo states that we don't have to have parameters, but this is an opportunity that if we choose to put parameters on, we can do that.
That's correct.
Yeah. So just to be clear, I think, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think the last year or two that we've actually established any parameters for the committee. Anyone remember that differently? So we don't have to do that, but if anyone has a desire to do that, this would be the time to do it. Otherwise, we can just move through that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Webb, I know, has some basic parameters that we use ourselves. If you all would like her to share that as a reminder, certainly happy to.
Yeah.
If you've all got that fresh on your minds from last year, then that's fine too.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I guess my only, I think I'm anticipating what you're going to say. I guess my only, I'd be more comfortable with this memo if it simply said that the committee's intention is to keep the calendar consistent with our past calendars, which is what you're going to do anyway.
That's right.
But now that we've kind of got a good calendar where everybody, like, there doesn't seem to much contention, it would just be nice to just put that in the memo that the expectation of the board is that the calendar is going to stay consistent and if there are any changes that you're going to bring them to our attention, then there might be some from year to year, the election days or whatever. If you make a I guess my expectation would be if the committee's going to make a recommendation that's not consistent with the current year, that it just be highlighted and we know it and why, and you explain why. That's.
Thank you for that. So though we haven't established formal parameters over the last several years, I do take notes on any feedback that the board gives, such as feedback from the community and the board's perspective of the success of the structure of the prior year's calendar. I'm happy to do either. I can revise this memo if the board wishes, or I can continue to take notes on your conversation and ensure that we start each of the committee meetings with the wishes of the board. I'm happy to do either.
I'll be happy to add a sentence to that. Sorry, go ahead.
So I'm going to bring up reducing the inclement weather days. I keep getting that from lots of people in my area, even if we could reduce it to 7, because like I said, when was the last time we used 10? And teachers starting back in July hurts my heart. Like, if we could at least, I mean, that would give us maybe 3 extra days in the summer or something, so.
And
I'll
I'm
make
going to
sure
bring
those
up,
two things are added.
I mean, it doesn't go in this, but I'm going to bring up early release days on Fridays. I continually hear that from parents in the community. I've experienced in a different school district, we had early release Fridays. It's helps working parents tremendously rather than having it in the middle of the week on Wednesdays. So I think there'd be a lot of support for it.
We'll make sure to have those discussions, regardless of whether you vote on those.
So can you just, I mean, I know we talked about the inclement weather days, but can you explain how that's just a matter of minutes in the day versus actual shrinking of the calendar?
Thank you. You've explained that, and so we do add minutes to the school day to build in those inclement weather days. So if we did eliminate some of those days, it would be a reduction in the minutes of the day. 37 minutes, I think, per day is what we do.
We do add that, and I would have to look up to see what each inclement weather equated to, the number of minutes. I'd have to calculate that.
Yeah.
Yes, but you're correct. We add 37 to each day.
Yeah.
7 for early release and late start, and 30 that equates to the 3 instructional days that we're allowed to reduce. So we do that and have 177 instructional days in lieu of 180 as allowed by the state.
So I think maybe those 7 minutes per day represent 3 of those days, the 177 versus 180, maybe, if I remember off the top of my head. But to your point, Mr. Galbraith, yes, the way to obtain, to have fewer inclement weather days is to have fewer minutes in the school day.
And I do want to echo what Claire said. I think Fridays is a better day for early release. And then, gosh, from 2016 to I think 2023 maybe, we always started on a Friday and then it got switched to a Monday. I don't know why that was. I mean, I know I was taken aback by it, and part of it is because I didn't keep up with the calendar, but like I said, if we could just figure out how to push the start back just a couple of days.
And yeah, Dr. Webb, I can speak a little bit for the committee as I recall it. I know you lived it. A couple of the factors that were recommended by the committee were related to Friday attendance for that half day, and a lot of the work that was anticipated to be finished on Friday didn't happen because of attendance, and students would come on Monday. And another element was, if I'm not mistaken, new enrollees, trying to get that work done, and then new enrollment settled down. It became less of an imperative to have that extra weekend to work. I may have missed a couple of factors.
The additional one is to give families an additional weekend of summer as well, was another factor, and moving from Friday first day to Monday.
But it didn't give an extra, it took 4 days away.
The totality.
No, it was starting the Monday after the Friday that it would have started. It started the Monday after that instead of the Monday before that. I mean, I remember the deliberate discussion that we had about it because it was specifically to give that extra weekend before school started. One thing I'll mention is this has been pointed out by a couple of people in the community that there's a May election day in this current school year. May, I don't know what the exact day is, but it's the county election. And we don't have it as a day off. I assume we'll have school sites as voting places, as we always do. So I'm just flagging that. I think the rationale, if I recall, was because it was so late in the school year that it was too difficult to take a day off in the middle of that time frame. Is that right?
We have national testing days that are set by College Board for high school AP testing, and that is a College Board AP testing date.
Yeah, that's what it was. So really, I'm not suggesting we change it. I'm just in future years, I'm just flagging that that's a potential area of conflict.
Thank you for that. We have had that discussion, and I think I said a couple of years ago, if this fits within my power, we're not going to have school on another election day. And sure enough, the very next year, it conflicted with a state testing day. I will mention, just related to the special election for U.S. Congress, the primary day happens to be a professional development day for teachers, so students are not in on the primary. I've actually had that discussion with our region superintendents, who include that western portion of our region where that congressional district is. The actual election day is a school day, and there will be a portion of our county that will be used. We've had a discussion with the election office, and what they have told us is they project a large turnout at the primary and a relatively small turnout at the final election day based on their historical experience. So we are planning on having school. I think it's December 2nd, if I'm not mistaken. We are planning on having school, but we do anticipate some of the polling sites in the western part of the county will have school that day. It is possible that we could ask the commissioner to waive that day and let us use one of those inclement weather days. But we've had an internal discussion and have not landed that there's a need at this point, based on what we've heard from the professionals.
Is it, Mr. Chair, is it possible we can request to beef up security with the SROs on that May election day? Or is that going without saying?
Absolutely. And especially because it's just a fraction of the sites.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Good suggestion.
So, and I just want to thank you, Dr. Webb, for, I know you've been on the calendar committee for a long time and chairing that. And, but the work that you did on looking forward a year, I know that it obviously made last year harder because you were scheduling for 2 years, but it really helped. I got a lot of feedback that like having that year in advance was really great for families to plan. So I really appreciate it. And I'm sure all the athletic directors appreciated it too.
The only other thing I would share, that was going to be a question, so we'll continue that 2-year. All the requests that we've had the prior years, we'll continue to take those pieces into consideration. And in response to the May election sites, it's a very small number. Our recollection is 3 schools that are utilized, but we're going to double check on that. It's a very small number, but we are taking that into consideration as we plan for those buildings.
And just because you brought up that second year, I just happened to look on the calendar because of the comment about the start date, and because I've heard that before too, how it seems like it's getting earlier and earlier, but a lot of it is a function of how the calendar falls, and if in that next school year, that start date is actually August 10th. And whereas this year it was August 4th, so.
Every 6 years, it flips back based on the calendar.
So, anyway, just wanted to flag that. Staying on calendar, the next item is approval of the calendar committee membership. Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Likewise, you see the memo where we're recommending the calendar committee, which includes the school representatives, and then I've included the recommendations from the Williamson County Education Association already. You are actually approving the WCS portion. I just included that extra as an FYI for you.
Any questions? Okay. We have a couple of items for board discussion. You saw an email from me a couple days ago about, maybe yesterday, where we need to start considering and discussing goals for superintendent goals for Jason for the current school year. I sent out a few suggestions after some consultation with Jason. Love to open it up and have a few minutes of discussion about those or any others. And just as I said in the email, we will talk about it here, make notes on whatever comments come up, and then refine these for further discussion and hopefully get these narrowed down to more or less what we want to vote on by the October work session. And we'll have another discussion then and put a fine point on it. So let's just open it up. You've got 3 in front of you, but there may be others you want to bring up. And while people were thinking about that, Jason, do you want to give your perspective on those 3? I know you've given some thought to all of those.
Sure. So number 1, the conduct a salary study. What I'm thinking about is a professional salary study. I actually had a handful of prompts related to this. We've done some work ourselves related to salaries over the years. But what we saw was county government actually just this past year found a professional to expand that. They have a little bit more access, quicker access to some statistical data. Also related to that, and Dr. Johnson, you actually touched on it just a few minutes ago, the professional who's got some experience beyond us has the capacity to look at the potential impact based on statistical impacts of some alternative models. And so what we saw at the county commission level was something that I had never seen before in the 20 budget years I've participated in, which is one particular department received a different raise than every other department in county government and different from WCS as a result of that salary study. And so in our relationship with the county commission, one of the discussion points we had was that we see the need too, but we need some professionals to show the need. So that's a lot of what's driving that request. We do anticipate there'll be a cost, so if you approve this, we'll do some research on a professional with a proposed contract cost. Second, develop corporate and community partnerships to support new programs or supplement existing budget items. Mr. Chair, in our discussions, I used our innovation center, our innovation hub startup as a key point with some corporate sponsorships. We are working through, I'm going to use a kind of a colloquial phrase, shaking the trees, to get some corporate sponsorships related to that to increase the likelihood that it's going to have some long-term viability. In that particular context, we know that when we get a grant from the state, often that grant comes with some additional expense. You get a capital grant, and then we have to pick up that additional expense. So that's my number one driver in that. And I know you all have been thinking about sponsorships as well. We gave you some data based on some of the discussions we had at our planning meeting related to corporate work. By and large, what we're getting is participation from corporations rather than significant dollars. So I want to take the work we did last year a step further related to that. And then leverage screen time committee recommendations to establish guidelines for student use of technology. We started that work kind of on the fly last year because we recognized the need. And that committee is going to do some more work over the course of this year. And you've seen some reports here and there. I have had a couple of board members suggest we consider expanding some of the committee's work as well with some additional recommendations. And so what I'm looking to do there is to find a way to maximize the value of that committee in helping us address the whole scope of screen time use.
Okay, any feedback or comments on those three suggested goals or others you want to put on the table?
So I just have a quick one for the first one because I don't want to make an assumption because you know what they say. But as part of the salary study, at least the way you explain it, they actually make recommendations. So it's not, yeah.
Thank you for that.
Right.
And we can add that language into that
Yeah.
and make recommendations.
Because like I don't want just a study, I want
Yeah.
recommendations if we do that. Any idea on like estimated costs, where we might get the money, like?
Rachel and Vicki, we've had some preliminary discussions. From where we would get the money, it would have to come from undesignated fund balance. Right now, we have about $16.7 million in that undesignated fund balance, but the reality is we want to save that as much as we can for the next year's budget. Rachel, Vicki, I know we've had some discussions. We pinged county government on that as well already.
We did talk to county government just as a curiosity's sake for how much theirs cost, and it was a little, right around $20,000.
I thought you were going to say 2 million.
But we, not that much, but we, you know.
Now, that's the cost of the professional work.
Yeah.
The actual cost of changes may be a longer term issue.
And they did look at county governments, but then they also looked, and I think that's one of the areas to look at as well. You may have someone that is a maintenance worker, but not just looking within schools, but other
Right.
Yeah.
Like
jobs
even our
around.
bus drivers,
Correct.
That's right.
Secretaries, bookkeepers, all of those things that are not necessarily educational, but are comparative.
I don't know if I should say this or not, but I'm afraid that was awfully low. I really do. Just past experience tells me $20,000 is not very much.
Yeah, but.
It's not.
A lot
Yeah,
fewer positions and.
I really
There's probably
like the,
And the person that they did use was not specifically, did not have an educational background. So in talking to the county, they did say they did not know that this particular company they went with would be one that we could use, but that was there.
Go ahead, Dan.
yeah, I really like the idea of using corporate partnerships because that usually leads to co-ops.
Yes.
It opens the doors for students and scholarships. And with the governor's plan, the 2 years that they can go, a lot of these corporations bring these kids on early on. They see and look at them and they say, this kid's interested. He's here on time. He's a hard worker. You know what? Let's hire him and send him on 2 more years and get him a degree.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's simple that way.
Yeah.
And it's a win-win for everyone. So I really like that,
Thank you.
addressing it in that way.
We have some prospects, but we need to close some deals.
Mhm.
So I mentioned this in my email back to Josh and you, Jason, but I mean, I would love to, as both a board and a superintendent goal, I'd like to explore the thought of innovation in our delivery model, and that could mean a bunch of different things. But I'd love to pursue that as a partnership between the board and you and the cabinet and staff, and how would we, like, what if we got to pick and we got to go to, you know, through the high achieving whatever that act is, right, that we can ask for waivers, or we can do some things differently. Like, what is it that we would do differently it might not require any kind of change from the state perspective, from the state board or the State Department, but you know, what would we change? Like, what are we just stuck in? We just do the same thing predominantly over and over, and we tweak around the edges. But is there anything that we would substantially change, or could we think? And it might, and that's probably not going to lead to some change that we make next month or maybe even next year. But it's all to meet our goals of achieving our strategic plan. But is there anything in the delivery system itself that might be changed? So I'd love to just explore that as a group over time and think about what that would look like.
So I actually have a thought on that, if you don't mind. Expanding outdoor learning opportunities. So I had been thinking about this. I don't know how many of you, I think we all got an invitation to go to that sanctuary garden or whatever it was called at Natchez Glen. So I went and toured it, and sparked a lot of ideas. And when I was driving in tonight, I noticed that we have a specially painted bus that has, I meant to memorize what it said on the side, but it basically was about outdoor learning. Is that, you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's an activity bus. It shows up at our schools with outdoor activities. Yes.
Yeah.
I probably never told you all about that.
Well, I've seen it before, but
Okay.
And so, you know, one thought is to use this year to conduct an audit of like what is happening at schools. Like, is there any outdoor learning practices that are currently in place? What do those look like? And then taking that information, you know, maybe this spring, and developing maybe a framework for, you know, what kind of outdoor learning opportunities could be provided at every grade level. Because there's lots of great things that can be done, and getting kids, again, outside of the classroom and experiencing, I mean, just the creative options are endless, really. So that's one thought I had. My other thought about all of this is, do we as a board want to define some deliverables as it relates to the goals? Having gone through this for the first time this past year, it would be nice to have updates on progress throughout the year, but then also if, like, say, the bullying task force, there was a deliverable there, but I don't think we heard what those recommendations were. We got the numbers, but I don't know if we heard what the task force recommendations were.
Yeah.
So, like, when it comes to tech use, evaluating tech use for instruction, I think a good deliverable would be to have an actual framework that's produced for K through 12 on what defines, that the framework defines screen level guidelines. How much time is being spent on computers for math and English and science and social studies. And that framework would also outline developmentally appropriate digital activities, like what apps are appropriate to use. I think there's a lot of flexibility right now, and schools can kind of determine maybe some of the apps that they want to use. I don't think I'm wrong in that. And sometimes, principals will ask PTOs to buy certain apps, and that's all fine and good, but like maybe the district should provide some guidelines on what those look like. Understanding how many different apps are being used in schools, getting that finite data of how much actual screen time is being spent on Chromebooks at each grade level for each subject. And I know that's quite detailed, but I think that that's important information to have.
Couple of questions. Do you think the thought about outdoor learning could be wrapped into the goal that Jay described for innovative models, and just use that as a for example?
Yes.
Or to include or something?
Yes.
One of the things that I've thought about for years, that I just want to be part of the conversation, not necessarily the goal itself, but I've just thought about a charter application for our district to utilize some of our excess capacity in at a couple of our elementary schools. I mean, I've thought about the Grassland area. We've ultimately got an empty school between those three schools there, between Hunters Bend and Walnut Grove and Grassland Elementary. And so if we can, it doesn't have to take place this year, but just to kind of do some research and thinking about what would that look like if we were to apply for that charter, and we could do a different delivery system as a pilot through that program. So
it's hard at this point to know how wide the scope might be, but that could be incorporated within an analysis of alternative delivery models as well. Yeah.
So we have the three that we had previously had on the table, plus one more. Any others that anybody wants to put on the table?
So it kind of goes with the leveraging screen time, but I don't want to just limit, I think one of the reasons why that was successful is because of all the diverse perspectives brought to the room and the collaboration. So maybe even expanding that to, active parental involvement in, and I know we try to include parents, but I really appreciated being able to make a recommendation, and I think that's why you probably had such good participation, because the person I recommended, he was already beating at my door and wanted to be part of the conversation. So I was like, here, be on the committee. So maybe leveraging that, using the screen time committee maybe as I don't know, but something to that effect about parental involvement at the district level, engagement.
Well, I think it may be because that committee is going to continue meeting and working all throughout the school year, or most of the school year, that the parental involvement is kind of implied in that. So maybe it's just, we're thinking of it, I have thought of it as more about cell phones, but the cell phone work is basically done now. So it's really going to get into other instructional use and so forth. So I think it may capture that already, but we can certainly play around with the wording.
And my vision for it actually included part of what Dr. Reeves talked about as well in analyzing actual student use. We do have parameters for apps, and we analyze them on an annual basis, but I don't think we've drilled down into particular content area beyond the apps, and I don't know what technology will allow, but those examples you gave as an analysis could be a component of that goal as well.
So what if we take these four and maybe try to rework the wording a little bit, maybe add to the extent possible, add some metrics or some more detail around the expectations, and then come back with new drafts of the 3 that we had plus the other one.
The proverbial SMART goals: specific, measurable, achievable.
And we'll send them around well in advance of the October work session so folks can think about and look at them before we get to the actual meeting.
Relevant and time-bound. That's what I was trying to think.
Sorry.
No, I'm sorry. No, you're good.
All right. We good on that for now? Okay. Then we need to talk about the board goals. And really, the affirming of the strategic plan, we have to do that as a vote, but I think that's less of, I don't think correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know that we're going to necessarily get in there and make changes to our strategic plan, so it's really about affirming that. But the board goals, I had suggested a couple there in my email. I think the logical one, if we align with Jason on the community and corporate partnerships, seems to me to make the most sense, because I think that's something all of us can leverage our own spheres of influence and outreach, and try to partner with Jason and the team on helping drive that. So that's one suggestion. And then the other would be, and I'm not wedded to this, but I think, we all probably at different times throughout the year go to the schools for events and other things. So we're probably already doing it, but is there value in us putting a metric for ourselves that says X number of times during the school year, each board member will commit to be in the schools in some form or fashion? And I'm not talking about going to a game, but I'm talking about being sitting in on a classroom, or sitting in on a school event, or an assembly, or something instructional related potentially. So anyway, I'll put those out there for thoughts and feedback.
Is that something that they want?
I think that'd be great. I actually do. I do think that'd be great. I'm going to give a specific example. Mr. Cash has made it a point to do that over the years, and and I'm speaking for you a little bit, Dan, but it's given him some insight. So yes, I think that'd be great. One example that we actually mentioned, maybe a month or so ago, is go to a high school lunch and see what that's like. One of my fun stories to tell is I actually shadowed a student an entire day a few years ago, and I asked her at the end of the day, how was your day different with the superintendent being at every class? It was different for me because the French teacher was just nailing me. She was not going to let me speak English in that class that day. But her answer was, nobody treated me any different, but the librarian let me out 1 minute before the bell rang to get to the cafeteria, so I was first in line. Just little things. You're going to learn things being in the building. So.
Was this an elementary school?
This was a high school.
Okay, I was going to say, because 6'5" and
that would be different.
3'5" is like.
Seventh graders react the most to me in my height. I will say that, for what it's worth.
That actually reminds me, I've had an Indy high schooler reach out and ask me to serve as their AP, capstone.
Capstone,
And
yeah.
that's allowed too, right? I
Yes.
said yes.
Oh, yeah,
so-
for sure,
okay.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
They didn't reach out to me about that. They didn't reach out to me to do that.
Well, you don't have a PhD in biology.
I know. You didn't have to say it. Okay. I know. I was trying to get her to say it. Okay. So what should the frequency be? I mean, how many times should we say we're going to commit to do that, and over the course of a school year, between now and end of school?
I don't know. For me, over the course of the school year, I try to visit at least one school in my district. I mean, each school in my district. There at least feeds to my district. So I'll go to Centennial staff meeting, visit Page High, talk to Dr. Hill, Creekside, because obviously you got kids there. But visit and do lunch, and also volunteer in the cafeteria as well at Creekside. And then, of course, Page Middle. So I don't know. I just try to, and I've been out to Trinity too. 'Cause some of my kids in District 12 feed into that school.
So should the goal be, to that point, should the goal be not a number of times, but say each school in our respective districts?
I think that's
at least once.
I think that's a start. I'm not saying I'm doing it right, but that's somewhere to start at least, make some touches. I don't like when the principals say, I don't know who my school board member is.
Right.
You know,
right.
that's a problem.
So any thoughts on that approach of saying we'll visit each school once in our district? Or, again, reality is, like, we're not going to get, fired from our jobs if we don't do this. It's more about setting expectations and trying to be intentional.
So along this, I like this. I think this is good out-of-the-box thinking, but I'm going to also add that, we represent the district as a whole too, so it's important to keep that in mind and not
Yeah.
just, our own schools. There's also a lot of district-wide events, and so, there's the opportunity to go to the Shining Apples and the military recognition and fine arts festivals and our Volunteer of the Year awards and on and on and on. And I think the last Wilco, the Wilcos. And so, yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of opportunities here that, we can and honestly probably should have better board representation at these various events that we do get invited to repeatedly.
So yeah, it's a good point, and it feeds back to maybe the original idea, which is having it more general about school events or district events versus necessarily our own districts.
When you think of how much we cross over from district to district, I think Independence, I think there's 5 or 6 board members that have students in that school. So it doesn't matter, like Eric said, it doesn't matter if it's your school, you're still a board member. And I've visited schools that are out of my district before, and I think as long as you call and let them know you're coming, I think they love it. I think principals appreciate it, and you build relationships with principals, staff members, and teachers. So it's a good thing. I think that's a great idea.
So what about a hybrid goal that says we'll do 3 school-specific events and 2 district-wide events over the course of the year? Is that too much?
I was just asked this week to give a 30-minute presentation to a veterans group because the grandpas want to know what's going on in the school district, specifically the school district numbers, metrics, and then the new education laws that have come down. They hear about them, but they don't understand them, so might want to add public speaking as a board-related activity.
I can get you a couple of PowerPoint slides I've used too, if you want those, in that example.
Well, why don't we, unless anyone has more to add right now, we can just take these and think about them between now and the next work session. But are we on the right track with the general goals, of those 2 general goals? Okay. All right. I think that might actually get us through the agenda.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. We're adjourned.